Good evening and welcome back to our coverage of the Assembly election. The big story tonight, which happened just after 8 o'clock, was the resignation of the Ulster Unionist leader Mike Nesbitt after his party's poor election performance. Here's what Mr Nesbitt had to say.
They certainly did not give me a mandate big enough for me to feel justified in continuing in this position, so I shall not continue in this position. I have spoken to the party chairman and informed him I will not be allowing my name to go forward for this year's election of party leader.
We'll have more on Mike Nesbitt very shortly, but first straight to Mark Simpson for an overview of the state of the parties so far. Mark.
Thanks. We now have a really good sense of what the new chamber at Stormont is going to look like. As you can see, or you're going to see shortly, more than 2/3 of the seats in here have been filled. At the moment, the largest party is, not the DUP, Sinn Féin. They have 24 seats. Sinn Féin and Michelle O'Neill have had a very good day so far. So what about the DUP? At the moment, they have 21 seats for Arlene Foster. Last time she got 38. They want at least 30 this time. It's going to be a struggle for them. We'll wait and see. So what about the other parties? Well, the Ulster Unionists have only 9 seats. If you want the reason why Mike Nesbitt has quit tonight, there it is there. On the other side of the chamber, the SDLP, they have 9 seats so far. Not a great day for Colm Eastwood and the SDLP. But the Alliance Party over at the other side of the chamber, at the back, they're celebrating because they have 8 seats. They've held on to all of their seats, even though it's a smaller, only a 90-seat assembly this time. They'll be absolutely delighted. There are just 2 more seats to tell you about. Jerry Carroll from People Before Profit has been returned to Stormont from West Belfast, and the independent Claire Sugden is back in East Londonderry. So those are the scores on the doors at the back of the chamber. Meanwhile, up here at the front of the chamber, all eyes are on the DUP and Sinn Féin to see if the DUP can overtake Sinn Féin. The next couple of hours are going to be absolutely crucial.
Mark, thanks very much indeed. Well, it's been a dramatic day, culminating in the news tonight that Mike Nesbitt is stepping down as leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. Our political correspondent, Enda McClafferty, has the story of what's been an enthralling day so far.
Mike Nesbitt cut a lonely figure as he left the Count Centre today, knowing the game was up. Within hours, his reign as leader of the Ulster Unionists was over.
For 3 months, I have been criticising another party leader for not taking responsibility for actions that occurred on their watch. So it would be the height of hypocrisy if I didn't take full responsibility for the results today for the Ulster Unionists. And of course, in pure terms, the buck stops here.
But he wasn't the party's only big-name casualty. Former Deputy Leader Danny Kennedy lost his seat after 19 years in the Assembly.
It was as Enoch Paul said, all political careers end in tears. I think I prefer Adelaide Stevenson, who when he was defeated said he was too tired to laugh and too old to cry.
So with big changes at the top of the Ulster Unionists, what now for the official opposition?
I feel very sorry for Mike. Mike tried to provide a positive vision of the future during a very negative period, a period that's been so poisonous and difficult for people to give a positive message. And I think that's what's happened.
But there were no crocodile tears from the big winners today. Sinn Féin's gamble to call the snap election paid off as their vote surged by 4%.
I just think it's an amazing day and we're delighted. Thank you so much to the electorate who've come out in strong numbers. The vote has increased. I think that's because people know that action needed to be taken. They've had their say.
But she's still not up for sharing power with Arlene Foster.
Whilst Arlene Foster has a shadow hanging over her, no one could sit with her and support her in the office of First or Deputy First Minister. I've been consistent in saying that. But that doesn't mean we can't find a way forward. That'll be over to the DUP to decide how they want to conduct themselves.
But Arlene Foster appeared to change her tone this evening. She declined all interview requests from the BBC, but this is what she said in her acceptance speech.
Let us move forward with hope. Hope that the common good will be able to prevail over narrow divisive interests. Hope that civility can return to our politics. Now there's work to be done, and work to quickly mend the relationship which have been frayed by the discord of this election.
Her party's vote has held, but they've lost some big names, including her close ally, Lord Morrow in Fermanagh, South Tyrone. Also gone, Joanne Dobson in Upper Bann, and former Minister Nelson McCausland in North Belfast.
There is a life beyond politics, and there are lots of other things that I want to do, and I have more time to do them.
Is that it, Nelson? Is your political career finished?
Did I say that?
Alex Atwood's 19 years in the Assembly have also come to an end, leaving the SDLP with no Assembly voice in West Belfast.
I feel much more for the party and for people in the constituency than I do for myself. Disappointing though this outcome has been after so many elections and actually so many close calls.
And lots of soul searching too for the SDLP in Foyle, where for the first time they were outpolled by Sinn Féin. Also in Foyle, People Before Profits Eamon McCann's time in the Assembly looks like it's over, leaving his party colleague to fight on.
As the campaign went on, I didn't really feel like storming the Winter Palace. I felt more like Custer's last stand, because the establishment parties in West Belfast threw a hell of a lot of resources against People Before Profit.
It was a good day for Alliance as they recorded their highest vote in decades.
We talked about what we would do differently and how we would try to re-establish the Assembly on a different footing where it would be sustainable but also be able to deliver for people. And I think people responded and connected with that message.
The Green Party is likely to hold on to its 2 seats, but once again, the TUV has failed to convince Unionist doubters. The final makeup of the next Assembly won't be complete until tomorrow. But the question is, will those returning to this building on Monday be up for making a real and lasting fresh start? Enda McLafferty, BBC Newsline, Belfast.
And now it's over to Joe Scott with some of today's other news.
Thank you, Mark. A man wanted over the murder of the prison officer David Black has appeared in court in Dublin. He was arrested yesterday in County Donegal. Damien McLaughlin, who's originally from County Tyrone, was due to stand trial last month for aiding and abetting the murder of Mr Black in November 2012, but he skipped bail. The 40-year-old was remanded in custody. Significant quantities of human remains have been discovered at the site of a former mother and baby home in County Galway. As our Dublin correspondent Shane Harrison reports, the home in Tuam was one of 10 institutions where it's believed about 35,000 unmarried pregnant women were sent over a number of decades.
The Tuam home was one of 10 institutions in the Republic into which an estimated 35,000 pregnant unmarried women were sent. And it's said that a child died there nearly every 2 weeks between the mid-1920s and the 1960s. The Commission of Investigation was set up to examine allegations about the deaths of 800 babies there and also concerns about the manner in which they were buried. Today, in its report, it said that it found significant human remains in 17 of the 20 underground chambers that it examined. And it also said that the ranges of age of death ranged between 35 fetal weeks and between 2 and 3 years. It said that it was very shocked at the discovery. The Children's Minister here, Catherine Sapone, said that what was uncovered was very disturbing and very sad, but not unexpected, given what had been said about what was going on there. Though she added, facts now had replaced speculation. Shane Harrison, BBC Newsline, Dublin.
A judge has ruled that the Stormont Executive has failed in its legal duty to adopt an Irish language strategy. He said it was unacceptable that a decade on from a pledge made at the St Andrews Agreement, no plans had been implemented. Last year, the then Department of Community, Culture and Leisure brought plans before the Executive. Rick Farragher was at the High Court.
This was a significant victory for supporters of the Irish language. Today, the judge ruled that the Executive was in breach of a requirement imposed a decade ago. Mr Justice Maguire said the executive had failed to adopt a strategy setting out how it proposes to enhance and protect the Irish language in Northern Ireland. He said it cannot have been the intention of Parliament that after nearly 10 years from the coming into force of the Act in 2007, that this obligation should remain unfulfilled. He said the required outcome is an adoption of the plans laid out. The Irish language group, which challenged the executive, Conradh na Gaeilge, said today's ruling is historic.
This is the first time that the Irish language community have achieved such a verdict in the court here. This obligation falls on somebody. The obligation was on the executive primarily in the absence of an executive, whether or not we go back into direct rule or whether or not we have some type of joint kind of agreement between direct rule and the Assembly. What the judge has demanded of the parties that are responsible here is that they must bring forward this executive as per their legal obligation.
A barrister representing the executive countered that there had been no inertia on the issue and rejected any suggestion of a sham process. The judge says the executive remains the key body which has been at the centre of delivery of government in Northern Ireland, and it cannot simply avoid doing what the law requires. Rick Farragut, BBC Newsline at the High Court in Belfast.
And finally to rugby, and in their Pro 12 game tonight, Ulster had a 19-7 win over Treviso at the Kingspan Stadium. Jared Payne, Sean Reedy and Charles Piatau scored the 3 Ulster tries. And with that, it's back to you, Mark.
Well, it goes without saying, this election has already had pretty dramatic consequences. As you've seen this evening, Mike Nesbitt stepped down as the Ulster Unionist Party leader. He said that in pure terms, the buck stopped with him. Other big casualties have been the DUP's Lord Morrow, who lost his seat in Fermanagh, South Tyrone, and of course Nelson McCausland, who lost out in North Belfast.
You probably heard that.
And Nelson McCausland wasn't the only casualty. Veteran SDLP MLA Alex Atwood lost his seat in West Belfast, and Sinn Féin picked up 4 seats there. While in East Belfast, Naomi Long and Chris Little from Alliance were elected on an increased vote.
Now, first off, we go to Newtownabbey, where both East and South Antrim counts have finished. Ita Dungan is there for us. Just talk us through those results in a bit of detail, Ita.
Yes, indeed, Mark. Valley Leisure Centre emptied, East and South Antrim complete. By 8 o'clock this evening, all 5 seats had been declared in East Antrim. The first 4 announced were all sitting MLAs. The Ulster Unionist Roy Beggs, Stuart Dixon of the Alliance Party, the DUP's David Hilditch and Gordon Lyons. And then we had a little bit of a surprise. On a day with little or no good news for the Ulster Unionist Party, UUP councillor John Stewart took the last seat here, making it 2 for the Ulster Unionist Party. Sinn Féin's Oliver McMullen lost his seat and the DUP dropped down from 3 to 2. In South Antrim, things took a little bit longer. Although Sinn Féin's Declan Kearney was quick off the mark, he was voted in on the second count. The Ulster Unionist Steve Aiken followed shortly afterwards, and then it was the turn of the Alliance Party's David Ford. Then things slowed down and the DUP had to slug it out. 3 candidates were looking for 2 seats. Paul Girvan and Pam Cameron were the winners, and Trevor Clark losing out. So the DUP, the casualty here in South Antrim. From here, it's all very quiet. Over to Conor Macaulay in Banbridge.
2 interesting stories here, really, one in each of the 2 constituencies. In Upper Bann, it's all about the comeback of Dolores Kelly for the SDLP. She lost a seat here to Sinn Féin in May of last year, and she's on her way back to the Hill after a very strong performance here. Essentially, in this predominantly unionist constituency, what it came down to was that Dolores Kelly was much more transfer-friendly than her Sinn Féin rival for that 5th and final seat. And as an illustration of that, she actually took 1,864 transfers from the surplus of Joanne Dobson of the UUP. Now, over in Urian Armagh, well, the story there, of course, was the political demise of Danny Kennedy. There was a 10 percentage point rise in the turnout, and that combined with very effective vote management by Sinn Féin, which delivered 3 seats for the party in that constituency, well, that really put the squeeze on that second unionist seat. Danny Kennedy was the casualty, a seat he's held since 1998. He was very gracious and sanguine in defeat, I have to say. He signed off with a nice line. I think he was quoting somebody else, but he said, "I'm too tired to laugh. and I'm too old to cry. And with that, it's over to Julian Fowler in Omagh.
Well, the big news here, of course, has been the DUP party chairman, Lord Maurice Morrow, losing his seat. That was despite Arlene Foster topping the poll and, in fact, the DUP increasing its vote here in Fermanagh and South Tyrone. But he just didn't pick up the transfers he needed. It was the Ulster Unionists, Rosemary Barton, who picked up transfers from the SDLP to secure her seat, along with 3 Sinn Féin seats, Michelle Gildenew, Gemma Dolan and Sean Lynch. And the Sinn Féin picked up another 3 seats over in West Tyrone, Barry McElduff, Michaela Boyle and Declan McAleer sharing more than 21,000 first preference votes. The SDLP's Daniel McCrossan and the DUP's Thomas Buchanan retained their seats. It was the Ulster Unionists who lost a seat here, the one previously held by Ross Hussey, who didn't stand this time around. West Tyrone had the largest field of candidates. 15 candidates stood this year, but 9 of them were eliminated in one stage, which I'm told is something of a record. And it's meant that while last year we were still standing here without any candidates elected at this time, they've all packed up and gone home this time.
Julian, thank you very much indeed. Julian Fowler for us down there in Fermanagh. And we were just hearing about that quote, just to clear up where that quote came from. Danny Kennedy said whenever he lost his seat, he quoted Adlai Stevenson. He said he was, as his voice cracked, he said he was too tired to laugh and too old to cry. And that was Adlai Stevenson, who was a 2-time US presidential candidate, ran against Eisenhower in 52 and 56. And a lot of people have picked up on that, Fionnuala, as one of the lines of the day, because it sums up the brittle nature of politics, really. Somebody like Danny Kennedy not expecting to lose his seat, and he's gone.
Well, he feared he was going to lose it, and it was part of the reason I imagine that he was so quick out of the drops to say that Mike Nesbitt should not have said what he said about transferring. And it was said with more force than Danny Kennedy often used. As a generally mild-mannered man, I did meet a Catholic woman from the area not that long afterwards, and she said, well, he'll get no transfers from me. And it was clear from the way she said it that she'd given him transfers before. But I should say in passing, since I'm retelling something else, I got something wrong earlier when I said that Nuala Toman had worked in Breed Rogers' office. I know from Katrina, and I think you've learned from somebody else, that that wasn't so. So I don't know how my source got that wrong, but wrong I got it.
OK, well, it's hopefully a relatively minor point. It was one of those things that you pick up, and it wasn't absolutely right on this occasion. So thanks for the clarification. Fair enough. I should say at this stage, welcome to viewers right across the UK from the BBC News Channel who've joined us for our continuing coverage of the Northern Ireland Assembly election. Coverage. You're very welcome to the programme. Thank you for being with us. Stephen Grimison, you've rejoined our panel, former Head of Communications for the Executive, former political editor of BBC Northern Ireland. What do you make of what's been happening over the last couple of hours? You were off stretching your legs, perhaps talking to some of our colleagues, but keeping a very close eye on developments. How's the picture filled out since last we spoke?
I genuinely didn't see the Lord Morrow elimination coming. And if you consider the 3 Sinn Féin seats there now in Fermanagh, South Tyrone, that's really quite a big statement by the Sinn Féin party. There were 2 leaders of unionism who I thought looked a bit shocked. I think Mike Nesbitt just looked very wary of it all. Looked like he was relieved to be resigning. And I think possibly because of the Lord Morrow elimination, and possibly because the election was more brutal and even than she thought it would be, I think also that Arlene Foster looked a little bit in shock when she was giving her acceptance speech. And there wasn't a single mention of, I don't think, of Sinn Féin anywhere in it.
And she's declined to be interviewed by the BBC so far. We're hopeful, of course, that she'll maybe talk to us tomorrow. But for whatever reason, she's opted to go home without giving a detailed interview to the BBC.
Yeah, well, she gave an interview.
Uncharacteristic? Do you find that strange?
I do find it strange. She gave an interview to Television Gaeilge. I think that there's the DUP are sort of hurting tonight, and I think they'll probably regroup. I think if Mike Nesbitt hadn't resigned, we'd be talking a great deal more about her position. But, you know, politics is a rough old trade. It's a dirty business, it's a rough business. And we saw today just how rough it could get. And I think the DUP were surprised at how rough it has got.
OK, what about Mike Nesbitt's decision to go? Again, I mentioned you were political editor here for quite some time, back 15, 16 years ago. So you worked with Mike Nesbitt here in this building, as did I, over many years. Were you surprised that he launched that preemptive strike and fell on his sword earlier perhaps than he had to? That's what people have been saying around this table earlier today. They were surprised, frankly, that he came out and did it so quickly, because the results, it's not good, but it's not as bad as it might have been at this stage.
There is a view that it is very bad in the sense that he did a really bad election the last time, and here he's facing the DUP under pressure. You know, Arlene's the goalkeeper, he's got the penalty kick, and Jerry Adams is sitting on top of her and he misses the goal. So
you have the view he had to go?
I think he had to go. I think that once he realised himself he was going to go, his basic instincts are, as a journalist, he wanted to get to the punchline first.
Yeah, well, I think maybe some people felt that he might just wait, talk to his candidates, you know, get all 18 counts finished and then make an announcement, whether that's late tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, on Sunday. But to do it, you know, when people are still fighting for seats within his party, seemed a little bit previous.
Well, yes, it looks like that. But I think the size, the devastation that he probably was feeling, having made no headway against the DUP under such pressure, and watching the Alliance Party, it will not be making headway in terms of seats, but it is really because they've got the same number of seats as they had before this all started. I think the nature of Mike, and I've known him thick end of 30 years, I think he just wanted to be rid of this. And the business, he'd be staying on until they decide what they want to do. I think that's a huge moment for the Ulster Unionist Party. I don't think they're going to take that decision quickly.
All right, OK. I want to talk to Stephen. Thanks very much indeed for now. I want to talk to Peter Weir, who is, of course, former Education Minister, successful candidate in Strangford. So, Peter Weir, first of all, congratulations to you. You had a bit of a gamble to move from North Down, where you obviously didn't think you could hold on to your seat, to Strangford, where you hoped you could win a seat, and the gamble paid off.
Well, I think facing obviously a fresh challenge. Obviously, the election, with moving particularly from 6 seats to 5, created problems for a lot of parties. And from that point of view, I think we wanted to try and maximise our representation. So I'm delighted that the people of Strangford have placed their trust in me, and I hope to repay that by serving them in the Assembly.
Now, we thought, everybody thought it was a bit of a tall order for the DUP to have 3 outgoing ministers in the battle for seats in Strangford and to hold those 3 seats, but you've actually done that. It's a very good result for the DUP in Strangford. You've got 3, Alliance has got 1, the Ulster Unionist Party has got 1. That's Mike Nesbitt, of course. It was the only constituency where there were 7 outgoing MLAs looking for 5 seats. That was the quirk of Strangford, of course. So you're pleased with that performance. Overall, how do you think you did in the DUP?
Well, you could say Strangford, it always reminds you sometimes of the Football World Cup whenever you talk about sort of the group of death. In that regard, I suppose we did have 7 chasing that. You know, I think from that point of view, I think there was a mixed picture. I think we succeeded in some areas. I'm disappointed to lose some great colleagues. Indeed, I'd commiserate with everybody who was a sitting MLA who has lost a seat. I think it's a very tough thing. I suppose politics can be very brutal, but I think there is some great talent that has been lost to the Assembly through the election. I think that's something that's quite sad.
OK, I want to talk to you about Mike Nesbitt and his decision to resign as the Ulster Unionist Party leader. And I wonder if you just picked up on what Stephen Grimison was saying. I don't know if you heard it, but he said Mike Nesbitt's decision to go has maybe taken the heat off Arlene Foster to some extent today. Do you think that's a fair comment?
Well, no, I think, look, Mike's going to make his own decisions. I think what happens in the internal mechanisms of the Ulster Unionist Party is a matter for themselves. I wish Mike well for the future. I hope to be able to work with him as a Strangford MLA. I don't know what he sees particularly as his future. Maybe there's an opportunity in the broader level with this for unionism to come together. I think we have seen what was quite a brutal election. I think one of the disappointments that many unionists will see in this election has been that as unions we didn't maximise our seats, and indeed in a number of areas there is a level now of underrepresentation of unions. I think that is something that we do need to tackle, and also see how best that we can try and move things forward in Northern Ireland.
Do you feel Mike Nesbitt's pain this evening? He's been leader of the Ulster Unionist Party for 5 years. He made big claims in this election. He didn't deliver on them. He fell on his sword. That's a political price, but there's a personal price to be paid as well in those circumstances, isn't there?
No, I think to be fair, we can all look at politicians, and I know sometimes people can castigate them, but there's a personal life behind that. I think there's a family life. I think it takes sometimes a great toll on people's families. And from that point of view, I've great personal sympathy for Mike, and really, in whatever avenue that he pursues, whether it's simply remaining as a Strangford MLA or taking another course in his life, I wish him well. There has been disagreements. There's been areas where, myself, my colleagues have not always agreed with Mike Nesbitt, but I don't think any of this has ever been particularly personal on that basis, and on a personal basis, therefore, I wish him well.
OK, well, look, congratulations to you, Mr Weir. Thanks very much indeed for sparing us the time to have a chat. Let's go to West Tyrone and talk to Daniel McCrossan, SDLP candidate who's held his seat. Congratulations to you, Mr McCrossan. First of all, you relieved?
Yeah, I'm happy, I'm relieved, and I'm looking forward to a rest for a few days before we go back to the Assembly on Monday, I think.
So just tell us about the tussle for that fourth seat, fifth seat. How did it pan out? Because Ross Hussey had stood down for the Ulster Unionist Party, was replaced by Alicia Clark. She did not hold that seat for them. You managed to get home. Was it a tight fight?
We were aware we were going to get a seat here. We'd always had a seat in West Tyrone for the SDLP, and I'm very happy to retain it. This is my third election in 2 years, and in all three elections we've managed to increase the mandate of the party here, and again today is no different. People come out in force and offered their vote and their support to me to represent them going forward.
And are you confident, just briefly before we move on, are you confident that the Assembly will get up and running again sooner rather than later? Because we've now got two big blocks, two big beasts, if you like, the DUP at one end of the spectrum, Sinn Féin at the other end of the spectrum, who seem, frankly, to have boxed themselves into corners. And it's not entirely straightforward to see Stormont reconvening in the way that we might expect it to do in normal circumstances.
I live in hope, Mark. If they couldn't get together before the election, there was no call for the election. Now we're faced with an election and the exact same result. And what that's going to lead to effectively, and my fear is, and the fear of the public, most of them out there, some of them out there, is direct rule. I don't want that to happen. I hope that Sinn Féin and the DUP don't want that to happen. And I would hope that they put their political differences aside and their political agendas aside and actually put the interests of the people on the ground first in terms of health and education and roads, the real issues, and put aside the them and us and start talking about we, because it's about everybody here in Northern Ireland. And people are very, very angry. This election shows that. That's why in my constituency there's been a huge increase in the nationalist turnout. That's why my vote has went up, and that of other parties as well.
OK, all right, Mr McCrossan, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Congratulations again to you. Come back to my panel for more chat in just a moment or two. But before we do that, let's hear from Tara, who's still at the Titanic Exhibition Centre for us in Belfast, where the four Belfast counts have been taking place today. Tara.
Mark, thank you. And joining me is Paula Bradshaw.
Hello.
Successfully elected in South Belfast. Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you very much.
And you must be pleased to be part of that eight team that you've retained those seats right across the board.
Yeah, well, I think that it's a really nice team in that, people are from different backgrounds, different strengths, different constituencies, and so I think it'll be really, really nice to get back at Stormont and do what we have to do to get the place up and running again.
And do you think that is possible, in terms of the relationship between the DUP and Sinn Féin?
Well, I think that's why they need the smaller parties to be in those talks, because I think it's so divided now that I think that the middle ground, the progressives who are coming through will we need to get our voice in there to ensure that we have a strong mandate with 72,000 votes. It's the highest we've had in a lot of years, and that is an awful lot of constituents who put their faith in us to go in there and negotiate on their behalf to try and get the devolution back up and running and to get things back on track.
And in places you've benefited where the UUP have lost out?
Yes, well, I think that's it depends really where like the Ulster Unionists have lost ground, and so in some places of South Belfast we've really picked up on their vote, but we've picked up from other parties as well. We're 2,000 odd votes ahead this time, and I think that they had to come from somewhere, and quite a few were from Unionists, but some also from SDLP.
And what about Mike Nesbitt then? Were you surprised that he's resigned?
Well, I wasn't really. I think as the day has gone on and we've seen so many casualties and big names, you know, like Danny Kennedy and stuff, I think that its position was untenable. I think that he gambled too much on the SDLP. I think it was a very honourable, very ambitious thing to say, but he certainly hadn't got the party with him. And so it's very much unfortunate that his political career in terms of leadership is now ended. I don't know who will fill that void within the Assembly team that's now coming back.
And what about, on a personal level, some of the other casualties, people like Sandra Overend and Joanne Dobson?
Yes.
You would have worked closely with Joanne
Yes.
in health. Are you surprised that people like that lost their seats?
Very
as well?
surprised, and I think that a lot of people will, you know, specifically Joanne Dobson. We were both in the health committee together and we did a lot of joint campaigning work around cancer drugs and stuff. So, you know, that will be a big loss to them in the party now. Robbie in Lagan Valley there, he's been very, very good, and he was on the health committee as well. So I think that he'll gather momentum as time goes on, but she'll be big shoes to fill, and it's a very sad day for Upper Bann for them.
Okay, Paula, thanks very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Congratulations, Mark.
Tara, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to North Antrim, Ballymena, and hear from our reporter Maggie Taggart. The result completed in North Antrim, so just talk us through the winners and losers, Maggie.
Yes, both counts here are over in Ballymena in the Leisure Centre. I'll start with Mid-Ulster now, looking at both constituencies. If you're looking for any unfamiliar faces, you'll not find them, but there are a few familiar faces who have gone. In Mid-Ulster, 3 Sinn Féin members, including Michelle O'Neill, have retained their seats, as did the 1 DUP member, that's Keith Buchanan here. SDLP's veteran, Patsy McGlone, regained his seat, but at the expense of a UUP politician, Sandra Overend. When we turn to North Antrim, not so many minutes ago, they lost one of its unionist MLAs, that's Philip Logan of the DUP. They are left with Robin Swan of the Ulster Unionist Party, Mervyn Story of the DUP, his colleague Paul Frew of the DUP, and Jim Allister of the TUV, and also Sinn Féin's Philip McGuigan. He has retained the seat which he was co-opted into after the resignation of Dahi Mackay. So all over now, and I say no more unfamiliar faces, and a few familiar faces gone from Ballymena.
Maggie, thank you very much for that. Let's get some numbers. I'll come to my panel very shortly to hear their thoughts on some of those developing stories. But first of all, let's hear a bit more about the numbers, and crunching them on our behalf all day, of course, has been our political editor, Mark Devonport. Mark, what have you got for us?
Mark, we're going to consider 2 constituencies now, but they're not just any constituencies. They're constituencies which we think might turn out to be crucial in deciding the end game. You'll remember that there were a couple of numbers that we've always had in the back of our minds when these seats have been piling up. One particular number was the number 30, because that's what any party needs to wield a petition of concern, the veto mechanism in the Assembly on its own. And we think that potentially South Belfast and Lagan Valley could play a bit of a role in that. So let's have a quick look. Nicholas, let's look at South Belfast first of all. We've got 3 MLAs elected here so far. Martin O'Mulla of the Sinn Féin, Paula Bradshaw of Alliance, and Claire Hanna there of the SDLP. Let's just look at it. Was Martin O'Mulla who topped the poll here, didn't he? Yep. So he's clearly there. As we say, the other 2 came in. We have 2 DUP and a Green, Claire Bailey, close behind. And this is the battle that we think is potentially crucial to determining the DUP's numbers, whether they fall short of 30.
That's right. Looking at all of those numbers, there are less than 2 unionist quotas, but there's also an awful lot of floating votes in there. And it seemed to me at the beginning quite probable that Claire Bailey would pick up enough transfers from the others to overtake one of the 2 DUP candidates. Not clear which one at this stage.
Well, we'll just advance the picture here. We're leaping through a few stages, stage 5. And here you can see that Claire Bailey has actually leapt up above Christopher Stalford and Emma Little-Pengelly. And the question is where some of these transfers might go, and whether they would deliver Claire Bailey home, or whether the DUP will be able to get their 2 seats, which they had previously in this constituency.
We're hearing from the count that Emmett MacDonagh-Brown and Niamh Gallagher were both eliminated, and that their votes have elected both Paula Bradshaw and Claire Hanna. Indeed, we saw that from the very first slide. Now, that's going to, I think, leave about 2,000 surplus votes, which I would have thought would be more likely to go to Claire Bailey than to the DUP. Michael Henderson will then be eliminated, and the question is, will the votes that transfer from him Will that be enough to pull both DUP candidates ahead of Claire Bailey? My bet would be probably not, but it remains to be seen.
So that's one way that they could get to 30 if they got those two in and everything else was even. But there's another place where the DUP is potentially under threat here. Paul Given of the DUP has got in Robbie Butler of the Ulster Unionist, Trevor Ludd of Alliance. This is in Lagan Valley. And this was how they stacked up. And previously, the DUP had 3 seats here. So if they retained their 3 seats and they retain their 2 seats in South Belfast, they get to the 30 mark.
Yeah, and there you see the SDLP some way behind in 7th place on first preferences.
Pat Catney looks quite out of it, and they haven't had a seat there in recent times. But if we zoom forward to stage 7, it's proven that Pat Catney is actually proving quite transfer friendly.
Absolutely, and here you see that this is the stage of the transfer of Jenny Palmer's votes from the Ulster Unionist Party, and you see that Pat Catney actually got more transfers from her than one of the DUP candidates did. And the final and decisive phase is going to be that transfer of that 3,500 surplus from the Ulster Unionist candidate Robbie Butler. Those will also be Jenny Palmer's votes originally. It could well be that enough of them go to Pat Catney, not enough go to Brenda Hale to give the SDLP a surprise victory here.
So these 2 constituencies we think could be quite crucial in determining the overall balance. If the DUP was to lose out in both places, then they could be down on 28 seats, which would be a dead heat in terms of the number of seats with Sinn Féin. But of course, the DUP got marginally more first preference votes, which means that under the current rules, they'd still be entitled to nominate the First Minister. Over to Julian O'Neill now in Lagan Valley.
Behind me, we have potentially some late drama here in Lisburn. We've only been waiting 10 hours for an upset, and the SDLP are claiming that one potentially is on the cards. As you were talking about there, Pat Catney and Brenda Hale look like they're going to slug it out for the 5th and final seat. Currently, Pat Catney of the SDLP is 130 votes ahead, and they're now in the process of transferring surplus votes from Robbie Butler, one of the elected, or I should say the only elected Ulster Unionist candidate here. The SDLP saying that Pat Catney, is transfer friendly to the Ulster Unionists on the basis of what's happened in previous rounds of this kind, and they are growing in confidence. We're seeing lots of pacing back and forward here between Brenda Hale's pile of votes and Pat Catney's pile of votes, both camps toing and froing. It's been a while since I talked to the DUP about this 5th seat. They were confident at the start of play that they would have 3 MLAs returned. That confidence has waned in the course of the day, but picked up a little with the elimination of Jenny Palmer of the Ulster Unionists at an earlier stage. But coming up on the rails is Pat Catney. We are told that they intend finishing this count this evening. It could be another hour or so, who knows? But this is some late drama here in Lisburn at the Lagan Valley count. Back to you, Mark Carruthers.
Well, that is a fascinating situation that is developing there for that final seat in Lagan Valley. It'd be very interesting to see if Pat Catney does take that seat. And if he does, and if it comes down to those transfers from the Ulster Unionist Party, then that is putting in motion, arguably, what Mike Nesbitt said on Sunday Politics, that Ulster Unionists should think seriously about transferring to the SDLP. And meantime, Mike Nesbitt, of course, has resigned as leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. I'll pick that up with my panel in just a moment or two. But before I do, I want to go over to Omagh, West Tyrone, and talk to Barry McElduff, whose catchphrase, Barry McElduff, is always keep her lit. And you got home safe and sound, so you did keep her lit.
I did, but in this particular election with the whole RHA thing, keep her lit and sustain the flame didn't seem totally appropriate. But I got in anyway on the first count.
I'd forgotten about that, Barry.
Well, I got in happily on the first count along with my colleague Michaela Boyle, and then Declan McLear joined us. But we've had a great day. Sinn Féin has had a great day at the Omagh Leisure Centre because West Tyrone and Fermanagh South Tyrone, Mark, both counted here. And out of the 10 MLAs, Sinn Féin emerges tonight with 6 of the 10, 3 in each of the 2 constituencies, West Tyrone and Fermanagh South Tyrone. If I could, Mark, just thank people who voted for us. It is very humbling to be in people's houses, to be sitting in their kitchen, sometimes eating apple tart, custard and fresh cream, believe it or not. It is given to you in houses. I do believe it, because sometimes we've had the odd bite together up at Stormont in the canteen. I know you like your apple pie and custard, so that doesn't surprise me one bit, Barry. Well, I swear to God, I had the happiest election experience going to the people up and down long lanes and round the county town of Tyrone, and that was the warmest reception I think I ever got and we ever got in an election in my memory. And in West Tyrone, we got the highest ever vote. We got a cumulative total Sinn Féin of 21,321 votes, and previous to that our high watermark would have been around 19,000. So we're really delighted leaving Omagh Leisure Centre tonight with such a success, you know.
Okay, and so much for the folksy stuff, and all politics is local, and that's terribly important, and I don't knock that in any way. But what about the serious business of big politics? What does that mandate for Barry McElduff and for your colleagues in the constituencies that you've mentioned, and overall for your party, what does that give you a mandate to do over the next few weeks and months? Spell it out for me.
Well, yes, there will be talks up ahead. Sinn Féin is arriving at those talks with a very, very enhanced, stronger mandate than ever before. And what is our agenda? Our agenda is genuinely equality and respect. I personally would like to see the two governments involved, not least the Irish government and British government, because they're co-guarantors of the Good Friday Agreement, which is still relevant, very much relevant, but which needs to be implemented in full, not least the rights agenda, the Bill of Rights, Acht na Gaeilge, all of those things need to be implemented. And I think my message to the DUP, who will be at the table as well, is that we are your equal. And, you know, eyeball to eyeball, toe to toe, the nationalist people, the Republican people, people with a progressive agenda have given us a mandate to say to the DUP, we are not less than equal. We are your equal, and that message needs to get home. The DUP need to come onto the page of equality and respect.
OK, you've got that mandate. Nobody questions that you've got that mandate. But do you also accept that people who voted for the DUP gave Arlene Foster and her team coming back to Stormont a very strong mandate as well?
I do accept that, and I do respect that very much. But, you know, in recent weeks, we've heard conciliatory tone, conciliatory words from the like of Ian Paisley Jr., which has been positively received, you know. And I think the DUP need to reflect on their tone and their language and their attitude to equality and respect. And this society can only go forward on a platform of equality and respect. And serious allegations of financial impropriety need to be dealt with, absolutely. And the two governments need to get involved.
Inquiry. They will be in the public inquiry into the RHI, which will report later this year. That's going to happen.
Yes, absolutely. And I would credit Martin and Willier with taking the lead and making sure that happened. But let's bring the two governments into the game as well. And I'm looking till the Taoiseach and the British Prime Minister to be directly involved in the talks up ahead, because they are co-guarantors of Co-Aintu Aine and Cesta, the Good Friday Agreement, and it's time that that was implemented in full, not least the rights agenda that's contained therein.
All right, Barry, congratulations again. Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Hope we'll see you up at Stormont again before too long. Fionnuala,
look forward to meeting you again, Mark.
Look forward to it indeed. Fionnuala, right, let's talk about that. Quick word about where we are as far as Sinn Féin's mandate is concerned. The mandate's there. What does Sinn Féin do with that mandate?
Well, who knows? I wonder if Sinn Féin know. I mean, the question for them was, if they brought people out, what were the people going to say? Were people going to blame them for staying in there too long and propping the DUP up? Or were they going to reward them for getting the DUP out? They rewarded them. But what do people really want? Do they want Stormont back? Do they want Stormont back even supposedly improved in some way? Or do they want to go into lengthy negotiations with possibly a different outcome? I wonder how much stomach there is for devolution in the wider nationalist community now. I wonder how much appetite for Stormont there is among Sinn Féin's wider support.
You don't seriously think, do you, that Republicans and nationalists more generally would prefer direct rule? Do you think that that's a serious possibility?
They wouldn't prefer it in a positive way, but it had become so sickening to a lot of people, and they'd been turned off so much by the long progressive picture of Sinn Féin rolling over in Stormont, which is what an awful lot of people, including a lot of their own supporters, were beginning to say.
So what direct rule
and they
would
weren't
be the
only
least
saying
worst
it in the
option?
last few months. I think there was a bit of that. I also think that Sinn Féin could tolerate a longer period of Stormont being down and out than the DUP could, both because, I mean, this is in their favour. Whether they see it like that or not, I don't know, on the grounds that they didn't invest as much personally, financially in each individual case as did many DUP members. And they also have their All-Ireland project, which is going at the moment quite well for them. Their votes going up in the Dáil, or the polls are looking better for them. So they could thole it, but how much of a stomach they have for negotiation, I don't know. And how much skill they have for negotiation, I don't know. Because they certainly didn't distinguish themselves all that well at many points over the last couple of years.
Quick word before I move on to other members of the panel. The SDLP's Mark H. Durkan has been returned in Foyle, so that's good news for him and good news for his party leader, Colm Eastwood. They keep their 2 seats in Foyle. What about this Pat Catney situation, which is developing in Lagan Valley? It's a fascinating situation. There is the possibility that the SDLP is going to sneak a seat from the DUP because of Ulster Unionist transfers. And you could say that all goes back to what Mike Nesbitt said on Sunday Politics, which was Ulster Unionist voters should consider transferring their second preferences to the SDLP. It seems that in Lagan Valley they may have followed his advice.
That's true. You've also got to remember that this is from Jenny Palmer. And Jenny Palmer's supporters as well have every reason to want to see the DUP suffer at their hands, given what Jenny Palmer suffered at the DUP's hands. But there is that ironic thing that Mike Nesbitt jumped or fell on his sword, or any of those phrases, arguably too soon, both for his own part.
You really think so?
I really do think so. I think both as a matter of common courtesy, and he is a courteous man, and as a matter of judgment, it was not the day to do it. There were those bad scenes of you asking and pushing perfectly properly, both Doug Beattie and Robin Swan asking these flummoxed guys, were they ready to pick up the mantle? And they barely knew that the mantle had been cast off. That's no way to leave a party. But there was a sense that it wasn't just the election result that threw Mike Nesbitt. I think a lot of us watching the leaders' debate were struck by how nervous he seemed, how shaky his voice was. You know, as a presenter, and I do as well, that if you're in front of a mic and you're in front of your voice gives you away quite quickly. You're tired, you're switched off, you're whatever. His voice was shaky in that debate. I think he was already shaken, whether because he got such bad feedback from within the party and because he was nervous about the result. But it was as though he had semi-decided before the result. He did it too soon.
Okay.
He should have waited.
Right. Let's just hear about an Ulster Unionist success. David Maxwell's down at the Titanic Exhibition Centre for us in Belfast. And we've been talking about some bad news for the Ulster Unionist Party throughout the day. You've got a little bit of a little ray of sunshine, have you?
I have, Mark, but let me just tell you first of all that the final declaration is about to be made in North Belfast, and I can tell you that that is going to be 2 DUP seats, 2 Sinn Féin and 1 SDLP. We've already heard a cheer go up for Nicola Mallon, and we also expect Jerry Kelly and Carol McKillen to be returned. They're just waiting here. That's going to be announced in just a minute. But as you say, yes, good news in East Belfast, and for the UUP, Andy Allen returned to that seat. What we have left in East Belfast is 3 DUP candidates. We expect Joanne Bunting to be returned, and then it's a toss-up really at the moment between Robin Newton and David Douglas. The DUP themselves not calling which of those 2 are going to be eliminated at this point. But yes, after that declaration, I got reaction from Andy Allen.
Look, I'm delighted. We've increased our vote significantly again in the constituency. We've been working hard since we were returned in May, delivering for constituency East Belfast. I hope we can get back and get the institutions back to delivering for the people. You know, I'm committed. That's why I came into politics, to work for the ordinary people and deliver for them, whether that be in health, economy, education, or infrastructure. We're there, and we'll always do what's right for Northern Ireland.
Are you confident you'll be able to return to the Assembly and make those changes?
Well, you know, there's going to be a long road ahead of us. Let's not take anything for granted. We're going to go into negotiations and we'll see what happens on the other side of that.
Andy, just over this way, the first Unionist elected in East Belfast?
Yes, absolutely. As I say, I'm delighted we've increased our vote, and I look forward to continuing to working with the other 4 MLAs in East Belfast, because it's all about that partnership, working, transparency, openness and delivering for our constituents.
It seems clear that a DUP...
Look, it hasn't been. I've lost good friends, people who I've built up relationships with since I came into the Assembly in 2015. I'm gutted for Sandra, Joanne, Harold, Danny. I'm gutted for them all, I really am.
Message to Mike Nesbitt.
Look, I came into the party under Mike's leadership. He's been supportive of me. He's guided me. He's been strong for me. He's been there. Look, I wish him well. I class Mike as a colleague and a friend. And yeah.
You don't fancy throwing your hat in the ring for the leadership?
No.
And it seems clear that a DUP seat will go in East Belfast. Your reflections on that?
Look, it's disappointing that naturally, there is seats going to go. There's 18 seats lost right across Northern Ireland, and that's disappointing. I spoke in the chamber on the reduction in numbers of MLAs, and it's disappointing the circumstances in which this has come around. And ultimately, we have to remember, whilst MLAs, good MLAs, have lost their seats right across all parties, it's the people of Northern Ireland that's been affected by this election. Estimated cost of £5 million, an impact on key frontline services, and we have to remember that. People were asked to come out to the polls again, and they were deeply frustrated, deeply angered, and there's an onus on all of us, the night they return to the Northern Ireland Assembly, to get this thing working and deliver for the people.
Andy, thank you.
Yes, Mark, well, as I was saying during that interview, those official results were made for North Belfast. So that's Jerry Kelly and Carol McKillen now returned, and Nicola Mallon. They joined Paula Bradley from the DUP and William Humphrey from the DUP. So that is the North Belfast count completed. We've, of course, already had the West Belfast count completed. We expect East to be completed very soon, and then South. So things going to be wrapped up in the next, I don't know, couple of hours maybe.
OK. Next couple of hours would be good, I'm sure. Everybody down there would be very happy about that. David, thanks very much indeed for that. I want to just pick up on some of those points with my panel. And Katrina, we've covered an awful lot of ground in the last 30 minutes or thereabouts. A couple of things you wanted to pick up on. What specifically?
Two things, and I'm not sure the body politic in the North has understood this yet. First, Brexit has changed forever. The vote on Brexit and the fact that a majority of people in the North, in this part of the island, wanted to remain in the European Union, with all its faults.
Yeah, and the point that has to be made, just in response to that, for the benefit of everybody, particularly our viewers right across the UK, who will probably be thinking, yep, OK, a majority of people in Northern Ireland did vote to remain, but of course it was a UK-wide referendum, and a majority of people across the UK decided by a narrow margin, yes, to leave, and that has consequences for Northern Ireland.
And what people throughout England, Scotland and Wales, and the Scots and Welsh get this, what they need to understand is this is an island, and the partition of the island economically and a European border on this island has had a huge impact on this election, a huge impact. I live in a border community. I was working in the north, my husband was working in the south. My one daughter's in college in Dublin, another daughter is in college in Belfast. So that's the first contact. And I don't think we can overstate the impact of Brexit on this election and the fear that people have right across border communities, from the Catholic, Protestant and
So has that partly brought out the vote for Sinn Féin? So it wasn't just a reaction to the DUP, it was also Brexit?
It was Brexit is underlying. And the other thing that I saw on the doors is the ethnic minority communities were coming out. And they were coming out, and many of them were voting Sinn Féin. But the second context, and people will be reflecting tonight, and we talked a little bit about it earlier, there is now 1,100 votes, roughly, between Sinn Féin and the DUP. We may have 20, I don't want to speculate on seats, but it's looking like either 28 all or 28, 20, whatever.
But you're going to be within a seat or two of each other?
Of each other. So the North has changed forever. And there needs to be, and I know we've heard the words that, to the point ad nauseum, respect, equality and integrity. There needs to be a psychological shift in relation to respect for what was the minority in the past.
And that works both ways.
No, I know, but just hear me out, Mark. There has not been respect for me as an Irish speaker, for my grandchild as an Irish speaker. As a 6-year-old, he was up in Stormont protesting. I would have preferred if he wasn't. if he didn't need to do it. He was shouting up in Stormont with 6-year-olds, Jarug le Farag, red with anger. He said to me, Mamo, why is Stormont cutting the money to my school? Now, I don't think people get the message of what you're doing to the next generation when decisions like that are made. I don't want my grandson doing that.
Okay.
So what needs to happen in our society is a psychological shift, and it's not just...
But listen, what I hear from Kieran Turrish in a second, but we don't have a DUP representative. Hang on, Katrina. We don't have a unionist here in the studio with us at the moment. But if we had somebody from the DUP, I suspect... Well, OK, we don't have an active unionist politician with us at the moment. I'll come to John in a second. Hang on, Katrina. No, let me make this point, if you don't mind, which is that I suspect if there was somebody from the DUP here, they would be saying, you're selective in what you talk about when you discuss equality and so forth. And they could think... And Jeffrey Donaldson made the point earlier today, there are lots of examples he could throw back at you where he believes, and unionism generally believes, that Republicans and perhaps nationalists more generally don't respect things that matter to unionists.
No, but in terms of equality, there's a legislative framework and there's 9 grounds on which you cannot discriminate. And Sinn Féin is absolutely clear. You can't discriminate on political opinion or religious belief, but you also can't, and the DUP have signed up to this, and on sexual orientation. But my final point on all of this...
Very quickly, if you would.
Yeah.
Or we're going to lose Kieran Turrish.
No, I know. But my final point on it is, this is not just about going back to Stormont. This is about the Assembly, North-South, British-Irish, and the human rights and equality agenda.
John, I'm going to come back to you in a moment or two and pick up on that. You are, of course, a unionist, but you're not a serving unionist politician, which I think is probably what I was getting at when I said that. Yeah. But I'm sure you will have something to say to Katrina in response in a moment or two. But before we do that, if you don't mind, I want to break off and I want to bring in Kieran Turrish, our reporter up in Derry at the Foyle count. And we've had confirmation that Mark H. Durkan's been successful. And indeed, there is the man of the moment standing alongside you. Kieran, evening.
Evening, Mark, on perfect cue, and it's a double celebration for Mark H. Durkan. Not only is he re-elected, but it's also his 39th birthday. Birthday cake tonight, then?
Well, I don't think it'll still be my birthday by the time I get out of here, unfortunately, Kieran. But yeah, double cause for celebration. Delighted to be re-elected by the people of Foyle. Honoured to be re-elected and determined to return that to them in terms of the work that I do on the issues that matter to them.
You predicted you would win 2 seats. You've retained those 2 seats. But is there disappointment within the party because for the first time ever you've been outpolled in first preferences by Sinn Féin? That's a worry for the SDLP and in what was a heartland for John Hume.
Look, there is a wee bit of disappointment at that. However, we have to look at the positives. I mean, we have increased our vote here by almost 3,000 votes. We have also managed our vote extremely well, got both candidates in, and that's something to be cheerful about. So that's what we'll be looking at. Sinn Féin have increased their vote by even more. We have to look at how they did that. We have to learn from how they did that, and we have to see about how we increase ours again in the next election, which we have done before.
Your uncle Mark Durkan, MP for Foyle, will he be worried about the Sinn Féin performance here? Because it has been pretty impressive and he has a 6,000 majority, but you know he's bound to be worried as you look towards the next Westminster election.
Well, I don't think he'll be particularly worried. I mean, Sinn Féin's performance has been tremendously impressive and well done to them for that. We'll focus on our own performance. As I said, I believe that we can improve it further. There's still 35% of the electorate here who didn't come out to vote, and it's how we get them to do so the next time and how we get them to come out and vote SDLP. We are the strongest party against Brexit. We've been the strongest party on the day-to-day issues, but sadly this election has become about more than the day-to-day issues, and I think it's important that we look at how to move this place forward now. We'll be going back with a strong team to Stormont. We're determined to play our part in making Stormont work for the people here in terms of delivering better health care, stronger welfare, better education system. These are the issues that really matter to people, and these are the issues that really matter to us.
Do you think it can all be put together again come Monday morning when the dust settles, or has there been too many insults traded amongst the parties? We've seen the political ramifications of all of that tonight with Mike Nesbitt going. Can it all be put back together again?
Well, I sincerely hope that it can. I think the people out there want that to happen. The people out there need that to happen for all of the reasons that I've outlined already. The SDLP will be determined to play our part in making that happen, and let's just hope that it does. But ultimately, it'll come down to those bigger parties.
I'll let you go and enjoy that birthday cake. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And Mark, with that, it's back to you.
Kieran, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's hear from some more members of my panel. John McAllister, just for the benefit of people who maybe don't know your background, you were a member of the Ulster Unionist Party. You then were the deputy leader of NI21, which was a small, short-lived unionist party of a liberal disposition. You were then an independent. You lost your seat last May. So you're not an active unionist politician, but you're steeped in unionist politics. How do you respond to Katrina Rowan's talk there about the equality agenda and the respect agenda?
Well, I think a couple of points. The one bit I would disagree with Katrina on is that this election was about Brexit. It wasn't a rerun. My sense of it was very much the old bugbears of our you know, what's bedeviled us for years, dealing with the past, Irish language. Are we going to move?
People are concerned about Brexit, not necessarily the majority of people, but it is an issue for a lot of people.
It wouldn't explain why the SDLP was under pressure, given their very strong stance against Brexit and campaigning and that. So I think this was very much an election about us all getting into the sectarian trenches almost, and just
what about those other issues that Katrina mentioned, LGBT rights, the Irish language? Have you got a problem with any of those issues?
Look, you mentioned my involvement in NI21. I mean, when we had an NI21 conference, I started a speech off with a few lines in Irish. It might have been fairly bad pronunciation. And the fact that, bizarrely, one of the guys that does the translation for Irish in the Assembly is a Portadown Orange man, you know, and it's unionism as a collective has tended to almost say this belongs to someone else, instead of recognising we need to keep ownership.
But look, here's the reality, John. Look, there are a lot of unionists, stroke Protestants, who've got no problem whatsoever with the Irish language.
Look at the word Linda Irvinson.
But it has to be said, there are unionists, some of them very high profile, who've got a big problem with the Irish language.
And you see the thing about putting legislation through the Assembly, particularly when the DUP had 38 members, anything that they wanted to strike out of the legislation, if they thought it was going to cost too much, they only had to petition to concern that one clause, instead of getting in and doing it. I do accept some of the stuff around the respect agenda, and I think, you know, it's been made comments earlier today, Naomi talked about it, about Arlene being one of the biggest recruiters for Sinn Féin. Arlene has managed to mobilise a vote for Sinn Féin. Yes, she's mobilised a significant vote for the DUP, but she's mobilised a vote for Sinn Féin, and particularly in those constituencies west of the Bann, to build 3 in Fermanagh, South Tyrone, West Tyrone, Mid Ulster. That's a tremendous result.
Okay, can I just bring Stephen Grimison at this point, because Stephen, you're in a pretty unique position to be able to give us an insight into how this might work, because for the last decade and a half you have worked as the head of communications for the executive, so you've been in there working alongside successive DUP and Sinn Féin leaders and trying to help them put forward their partnership agenda. Now, we are where we are. We've had an election. We don't know quite what happens next. Both of those parties are going to go back with renewed mandates. And the difficulty seems to be that they seem to think that their mandates are mutually exclusive. So how do we move on from here?
Well, the difficulty has always been that while they could agree at a very high level on the sort of things that you would expect them to agree on, in terms of we need to put more attention to infrastructure, the health service, education in schools, it's once you get down into the detail that it all tended to fall apart. And the problem in the politics of all of this is that when the pressure comes on, as it did in the few weeks running up around Christmas and into the new year, those parties tend to withdraw into themselves. Don't talk to officials particularly, don't talk to, if you're not part of the Sinn Féin and the DUP cognoscenti, you're not part of the argument. And that sense of ourselves alone on both their parts doesn't help, because there's very little air very little light getting into the situation. So if you look at the takeaways from the election for the DUP, well, we're still there. We're still the biggest unionist party. Whether the biggest party is still up for grabs a little bit. But somewhere along the line, there's got to be a sense of, well, let's just back this down a bit. And one of the things, believe it or not, that Peter Robinson was quite good at was being incredibly pragmatic when he had to be. And I think there's a degree of pragmatism going to be required.
And is Arlene Foster the person to deliver pragmatism?
Well, she's going to have to be if she's going to continue to be leader.
The only thing I would say on that, Mark, is, following Stephen's point, that's why you need to move. And I'll give Katrina this. If you have respect, you move to genuine power sharing, not shared out power. We have too many ministers acting as king in their own wee fiefdoms, and that is not good, and that builds that silo.
I need to break in because we've got an interesting story that is just developing, and we can confirm the details now. Lisburn Leisureplex, Lagan Valley Count, and Julian O'Neill is there for us. We were talking earlier about the battle for that final seat. Pat Catney of the SDLP, we thought he was pretty much out of the mix. Now we hear he's back in again. Can you confirm that the 5 seats have been declared?
It's about to be, Mark. Pat Catney will take the 5th and final seat in Lagan Valley. I'm still waiting on the official figure, but I'm told he beat the DUP's Brenda Hale by about 430 votes at the end. He will be thankful for all those Ulster Unionist transfers that has taken him over the line. It was probably the result that no one saw coming here in Lagan Valley. Earlier today, when I arrived at the Count Centre, the DUP were confident of holding their 3 MLA seats. At the end of tonight, they are down to 2. Pat Catney has sensationally taken the last seat here in Lagan Valley. It means the DUP are represented by Paul Given and by Edwin Poots. There is 1 Alliance seat, Trevor Lunn, 1 Ulster Union seat, Robbie Butler, and the 5th and final seat, about to be officially declared, Pat Catney of the SDLP.
Well, that is a fascinating development. Julian, thanks very much indeed. I want to get some panel reaction. Fionnuala, that is quite remarkable. And just to clarify for people at home, that has happened, and we now know that. We've had the confirmation. That has happened because of Ulster Unionist transfers. And let's not forget, 10 months ago, Pat Catney just missed out on the 6th seat. Today, he's won the 5th seat. Quite something. It is. And for the SDLP, it's a sweet one. There was a long, long period when Peter O'Hagan held the fort there for Lisburn, very lonely and very, very embattled. One thing strikes me, I hope Jenny Palmer doesn't get bad treatment on the ground after this from disgruntled DUP supporters who will say your transfers took that SDLP man across the line. Lisburn is one of the most bitter places behind a semi-civilised facade that I can think of in this place. And well, of course, she's
Jenny
got
Palmer
no control. I mean, she has absolutely no control over how her voters transfer.
But you know perfectly well how such things pan out.
Yeah, well, we're just looking at pictures here of the formal declaration. There's the Deputy Returning Officer, and we can see there Paul Given, Edwin Poots, Trevor Lunn. We can see the Ulster Unionist Party's Robbie Butler. And actually, there's Pat Catney, of course, there on the left of our picture.
Another little ironic thing there is Pat Catney was brought into the party by Alistair MacDonald, whose period as SDLP leader was pretty unhappy and which ended on a pretty sad note. And it must be ironic for him watching this as well. Bittersweet, really.
And he's a bit of a character, Pat Catney. Of course, he owns a well-known establishment and owns certainly the Kitchen Bar in Belfast.
Mark, this could have a significant impact on the DUP Sinn Féin balance in the high 20s of seats. It's not completely clear yet who's coming out in front here, or will they be even Stevens at the end?
Yeah, and that is a fascinating situation. Now, that picture might not become clear tonight, but that will become clear tomorrow morning, and that is the fascinating situation.
Really
we already know
nail-biting for Arlene Foster tonight.
Yeah, and could that be, and Stephen, maybe you're the person to answer this, could that be a defining issue for Arlene Foster? The point was made earlier today by yourself. Mike Nesbitt's resignation has taken the heat off Arlene Foster tonight. But if it turns out that Sinn Féin is ahead in the seat tally, the pressure's going to be on her again, isn't it?
Oh, enormously. And what a parting gift from Mike Nesbitt to the DUP that Pat Catney gets the seat, the last seat. So, yeah, I mean, all bets are off. We get to that position.
Fascinating situation. It really genuinely is. Let's just hear from Mark Devonport, who's got some more numbers for us, and maybe he might just want to reflect on that very, very interesting and potentially significant announcement that we've heard from Julian O'Neill. Mark.
It is very interesting, and it's also particularly interesting to those of us who misspent a bit of our youth in the Kitchen Bar, and I owe Pat Catney quite a lot for various plates of mash and mince that he used to serve along with a beer there. So we'll have to be dealing with him in completely different circumstances. Our current thinking at the moment is that that is quite significant because it deprives the DUP of the petition of concern. We were talking earlier that South Belfast might be the one, but Lagan Valley has now nipped in and done that, hasn't it, Nicholas?
Absolutely. We're now looking at the DUP finishing on 28 seats, roughly the same as Sinn Féin, although Sinn Féin's 28th is not yet certain, as we shall discuss.
Yeah, so we're going to find that out, that it's possible that Sinn Féin might not get as many as the DUP. But one of the whole issues that led to Mike Nesbitt stepping down was those controversial comments he made where he said he'd be giving his number 2 to the SDLP, and many of his candidates disagreed. Let's look at some constituencies where it may be that the whole business of the opposition parties transferring between each other actually did make a big difference. First of all, for Manor South Tyrone.
Absolutely. I mean, here we had a situation where the Ulster Unionist Rosemary Barton starting in 6th place, and not a brilliant 6th place when there are only 5 seats to be elected.
But we have to watch Richie McPhillips, who was just behind her in 7th place, the SDLP candidate. Rosemary Barton was one of the unionists who said, look, I don't agree with the leader on this. I think my supporters should transfer in a pro-union way. But look what happened. If we race through stage 2, Arlene Foster gets elected. Richie McPhillips at this point is down at the bottom. Where do his votes go to? Rosemary Barton is still out of the running, isn't she, at this particular point? And then the next stage, Rosemary Barton says thank you to the SDLP for 1,471 transfers.
SDLP give more transfers to the Ulster Unionists than to any of the 3 Sinn Féin candidates. It might seem extraordinary, but let's not forget that Richie McPhillips won his seat last year because he got 990 transfers on the last count from the Ulster Unionists.
And that allows him to leapfrog Maurice Morrow. And what do you know? Rosemary Barton is elected, and Sean Lynch comes through for Sinn Féin. So for Manor and South Tyrone, those cross-community transfers definitely played a role. And we're looking at somewhere else where they may also play a role. East London Derry. Here we've got a good performance by Kiva Archibald at the top there. Maurice Bradley for the DUP. Claire Sugden polling very well. And John Dallin, apparently at the start of the race, you'd say he was fatally damaged by the fact that the ex-SDLP MLA, Jerry Mullen, was standing as an independent.
In all fairness, I think we actually did say that.
I think we did. Sorry about that, John, because as ever, you can never predict the fortunes of these single transferable voting systems. We've got Claire Sugden elected now. She's leapt up, very transfer-friendly politician. But John Dallin is beginning to pick up transfers, isn't he?
And what's happened since then, as we're aware, is that McCandless's votes have been redistributed. They were sufficient to elect Claire Sugden. And now we're seeing that those votes are, in fact, heading...
Votes that came from the Ulster Unionists may end up eventually, via Claire Sugden, with John Dallin, who has now leapt ahead of Adrian McQuillan and has Carlo Oisin of Sinn Féin in his sights, does he not?
He does, and you see Claire Sugden now has a surplus there of 600 votes. There is a gap of 81 between John Dallin and Carlo Oisin. I would have thought it's quite likely that enough of those 600 votes will drift towards the SDLP to deprive Sinn Féin of the gain that we thought they might get. And interestingly, to keep the SDLP on level pegging after the election in a situation when we have lost a 6th of the Assembly seats.
Yeah, the SDLP have done very well in transferring their votes into seats. They actually fell very slightly in the share of the votes, but they seem to be retaining their seats. On that note, let's go over to the Titanic Centre and Tara.
Mark, thank you. And joining me now is Sam McBride from the newsletter and Carol McKillen, who's just been elected in North Belfast. Carol, first of all, you must be pleased with Sinn Féin's result today.
I'm absolutely delighted. Not only our percentage of our vote has went up, but even if you compare the actual first preference votes from last May, I mean, there's a difference of 2,000 additional votes. That's fairly substantial. And I think one of the main reasons for that is particularly around the RHI scandal, even just the attitude and the disrespect. That was actually felt quite a lot on the doors. And also this desire to get the institutions working and to basically give us all a mandate to get in and get things sorted. I mean,
but you've done well, but the DUP have done well as well.
No, but I'm not starting for the DUP, I'm starting for Sinn Féin. And what we have said is, our party leader, Michelle O'Neill, has said, what we win for all, and that's attitude that I've had, and that's attitude that we'll go into the institutions with. But it has been a good election for Sinn Féin. I mean, that's
do you
the
think,
position.
just some of the number crunching that Nicholas and Mark were doing there, do you think there is a possibility that you'll end up with the same number of seats as the DUP, or do you think they will just be maybe 1 or 2 ahead?
I'm not sure. I actually was trying to look at some of the figures on the screen, and we're getting some late results coming in from East Derry, so I don't know. But the fact is, we've had a really good election, and the DUP have had a good election for the middle of an election. Some of the predictions, now possibly not from them, but certainly from pundits, and that would have actually put them at a higher level. But the fact is that we have shown very positive, progressive leadership, energetic leadership, conciliatory leadership, and I think that's something that the DUP needs to take on board and back in these institutions.
Sam, lots to talk to you about, but let's condense it down and talk first of all about the DUP's election, and that 30 figure for the petition of concern is not looking guaranteed.
I think the DUP would have been looking to get over 30. They were always going to lose certain seats. They accepted that in places like North Down by only running 2 candidates rather than 3, where they had 3 seats beforehand. I think if one steps a little bit back from the party politics of this and looks at it in broader terms, it's a very good election for that centre ground block of Alliance and the Greens and those sorts of non-aligned parties. It's an outstanding election for nationalism, complete reversal of the very poor result which nationalism had 10 months ago, when Sinn Féin, I think, was the biggest loser in terms of the percentage share of the vote. That's completely reversed this time, and it's really nothing short of a disaster for unionism, I think. Every unionist party is really licking its wounds to varying degrees. Mike Nesbitt has obviously ultimately accepted, or rather very quickly accepted, what would have been the ultimate outcome of that result for him. Arlene Foster certainly doesn't give any indication that she's planning to follow that at this stage, but I think there will be a lot of pressure on her as well, because to be just 1-2 seats, if that is where we end up, ahead of Sinn Féin, having been 10 seats ahead of Sinn Féin, that's a very, very bad result for the DUP.
And when it comes to Mike Nesbitt then, do you think he was premature? Do you think he should have resigned?
I think he preempted what was an inevitable decision by the party, if not by him. I think that it was probably quite a clever thing to do in terms of not only not leaving the issue to fester within the party, which it would have done. People were already unhappy at his comments about voting for the SDLP, and that was always going to come to a head if they did not make significant gains, let alone make losses as they have done here. But I think secondly, it also puts the focus really back on Arlene Foster. Mike Nesbitt has now gone after a bad result. The DUP result is not as bad in many ways as that for the Ulster Unionists, in the sense that they are still the largest party, they're a much bigger player, but it's very bad when you look at it across the board. Losing your chief whip, losing the party chairman, losing very significant figures like Nelson McCausland, that's not a good election for the party.
And what about RHI then? Do you think that was the factor?
I think it's very difficult to tell why people voted the way they did. Clearly that, I think, has reinvigorated nationalism, as Carol has said there. People in the SDLP saying that not only that, but also Arlene Foster's crocodile remark, really, they noticed from that point there was a real turning point, a hardening of attitudes, where people who might have voted SDLP at that point said, no, we really want to send a message to her. So I think that there were a mixture of factors there. I think to a certain extent Arlene Foster's tactic, I suppose, of constantly throwing up the spectre of Sinn Féin being the biggest party possibly saved the DUP in some seats. It brought out voters that perhaps wanted to stop that, but we also see the opposite effect of that within nationalism. It really drove nationalists towards Sinn Féin to try to fulfil what Arlene Foster said might happen if indeed they voted in that way.
Carol, just a final word from you. In some ways, did the DUP make it easy for you to make the gains with some of the comments they made around the crocodiles in Irish language?
I think Martin McGuinness made the gains for Sinn Féin initially when he stood Arlene Foster aside and effectively triggered this election. But I do think some of the offensiveness from Arlene Foster has motivated people to come out right across the board. I think, she does need to reflect on what she has done as a leader. Mike Nesbitt's made his decision. I think he's jumped before he was pushed. But it is, I agree with Sam, it's a clever decision to make. I think Arlene Foster needs to reflect on her own position. I'm sure she'll be doing that over the next coming days.
Okay, both of you, thanks very much indeed. Back to you, Mark.
Tara, thanks very much indeed. We're going to have a good chat, a good wash-up with members of my panel in just a moment or two. But before we do that, let's take a look at the overall state of the parties. And are there any other bits and bobs we need to take a look at with Mark Simpson?
It's shaping up to be the closest Assembly election in history. More than 80 of the 90 seats have now been filled, including quite a few in the last couple of minutes. I don't even know what's going to pop up here, but we'll give it a go. What I do know for sure is that the biggest party is still Sinn Féin, with 26. That's only 2 fewer than the party got last time, even though it's a smaller Assembly. How close are the DUP? We know they've been creeping up. How many seats have they now? 25, only 1 seat behind. It's a long way from the 38 they got last time, and it's also short of the magic 30 mark, but the DUP are creeping up on Sinn Féin. Who's in third place at the moment? Well, it's back on the nationalist side. The SDLP have 11 seats. I suppose no big deal in terms of gains for the SDLP, but Colm Eastwood will be relatively happy with that. Who's next? The Ulster Unionist, Mike Nesbitt, not happy. Hasn't made any real inroads into the DUP. Look at the number of seats there, 10. If you want to know why Mike Nesbitt has quit tonight, there's the reason there. No big gains for the Alliance Party, but they've held on to their 8 seats. There they are behind me, and they'll be absolutely delighted under their new leader, Naomi Long. Let's have a quick look up at the scores and the doors to see how the other smaller parties and independents are doing. There they all there now, and you can see Jim Allister, the TUV leader, is back at the back of the chamber making plenty of noise. But all eyes will be here on the front of the chamber. There's a big battle going on between the DUP and Sinn Féin. Only 1 seat in it at the moment to see who's going to win the most seats. It could even end up as a 28-all draw. All we know, Mark, it's going to be a photo finish.
Looks like a photo finish indeed. Mark, thanks very much indeed for that fascinating situation. I'm going to come to you first, Stephen Grimison, because you're an expert at the numbers here. And I was just to pick up on what Sam McBride, the political editor of the newsletter, was saying. He described this as, I think I heard him correctly, a disaster for unionism, was what he had to say. He said it is not a good election for Mike Nesbitt, and he's gone, but it is not a good election either for the DUP. They may end up a seat or 2 ahead, but they've lost their chief whip, they've lost their party chairman, they've lost significant figures like Nelson McCausland, Brenda Hale, Philip Logan. How much pressure is Arlene Foster likely to come under in the next 24, 48 hours, do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it'll be the next 24, 48 hours, but pressure there will be eventually. And this has been a bad election. Look at where she started out the day as leader. 57,000 votes at the last election ahead of Sinn Féin. She may hold on to the post of First Minister by the 1,200 or so votes that she is ahead of Sinn Féin in the overall vote if it's a 28-all tie. That's going to send shockwaves through unionism. It absolutely is. And it will be, I mean, you've already people, her political opponents saying she should consider her position, but this, given where she was when she took over and the honeymoon period there was with the media, she seemed invulnerable. And look at what has happened just a few months down the line.
John, quick word.
I mean, looking at the numbers, it looks like in people designating unionists and nationalists, it's going to be almost a dead heat, you know, and then the bit in the 2 big parties. People talked before this election if the DUP went below 30, Arlene would be under real pressure. It's now looking 30's very, very unlikely.
And if it ends up as a dead heat, 28 apiece, let's just speculate for a moment or two. Yeah. If that was the case, she would still, or the DUP would still be able to appoint the First Minister rather than the Deputy First Minister, because in terms of the popular vote, there's a margin of about 1,200 between the DUP and Sinn Féin. That's right, isn't it, Stephen?
Wafer thin, yes.
Yeah, it is wafer thin, as you said earlier. It's wafer thin, but it would still be enough for the DUP to claim the First Minister's position, though, of course, as we know, they are equal positions.
Well,
that's why I wanted to name them.
Which was part of your move, of course, before last May. Katrina.
And which is the point I was making earlier. I think people should not be getting hung up on First and Deputy First Minister.
Well, unionists.
Because, well, they are. Unionists are.
Well, some unionists. There's lots of unionists that don't. And what I think we need, and this is what I've seen, we need a psychological shift now, where it's 50-50. Our society in the north is moving and changing and shifting. And also, earlier, John, we were having a little debate about Brexit. I'm not saying that Brexit was... what I'm saying is it was one of the key issues, and one of the reasons people came out to vote is so many people on the door said to me, we don't want to be left here on our own in this little, in the 6 counties.
Okay, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back too much into that, because I want to try and look ahead.
And the reason they were coming, supporting us, is not just our growth in the north,
all right,
but also our growth in the south.
All right, Fionnuala, your thoughts as we just enter the last couple of minutes of our output.
I think for both political communities, it's time for a rethink. I hear what Sinn Féin say about equality and respect, and it does resonate very widely in the Catholic community, in what used to be a minority and which is definitely no longer a minority. But they have to carry it a little further than that. They have to watch it on their language always. They need to go easier on things like commemorating, as Michelle O'Neill did in Clonaux, which of course she had to do as the first clean skin leader. But they've got to watch that, because that doesn't look like respect. And for unionism, it's a much bigger question. They have lost the majority in any real sense. That's a big psychological blow right through unionism, and it really ought to call for a big rethink. Not just from Arlene Foster, it's been personalised around her, but she isn't a single voice inside the DUP. She spoke in her arrogance for DUP arrogance. That has to have been humbled today.
OK, I think viewers on BBC Northern Ireland are going to stay with us until 12:30, in fact, so that's the good news. Fionnuala, you were looking forward to getting home to your bed. The good news is that it's time and a half after midnight, so you don't need to worry about that.
Ooh,
we are, because we
wow.
just think there are some results about to come in, and they could significantly shape things, so it would be unwise of us here, locally certainly, to head off to bed whenever some of those critical announcements could be just about to be made. Stephen, Katrina is making the point that unionists shouldn't get hung up about some of the things that they get hung up on. But you know these people very well. You work with them. You've worked with lots of people up at Stormont down the years. You were making the point, I think, I don't know if people caught it at home, you were saying, but they are hung up on it. It does matter to them. Who's First Minister matters. Who's the big designation. Who's got a majority at Stormont. It does matter.
It was part of the DUP narrative for the election. Very front and centre. Just as a side issue for some, but an important issue for others, if the DUP get to say 28, I think the clamour on same-sex marriage and all that sort of stuff will get up, because petition of concern will not be as easily come by, and I think there will be amazing and enormous pressure in relation to making us like the rest of the UK in relation to all of that.
And what do you think the executive, John McAllister, if it gets up and running again, might look like? I mean, presumably it would include the DUP and Sinn Féin, but might it include the Alliance Party? Do we assume that the Ulster Unionists and the SDLP would be in some sort of opposition? What shape do you think it'll have?
I think, oddly enough, in a rough to hunt situation, the Alliance will qualify for the 7th ministry, and whether there's pressure from Sinn Féin to bring justice into the Hunt, I don't know. But so I think Alliance, will probably stick with their demands, as Naomi said earlier, the things they wanted to look about, abuse of petition of concern. That may somehow have naturally, the people might actually have answered the abuse of the people, or how we change the petition of concern, because it's not going to be as easy come by. But things round, unionism, and I do get this, and I've nearly give up my political career by telling unions sometimes you're going down the wrong road on things like Irish language. Instead of reflecting that Presbyterians saved the language after the famine, that at the early days of Home Rule, that Irish and English were on the welcome signs, or when Queen Victoria visited Belfast, somehow somebody came along and said, this doesn't belong to you, Mark. And we all took our ball and went home, instead of actually just saying, this is as much part of my heritage as yours. I'm as Irish as Katrina or Fionnuala, but I can be British as well. I can be Northern Irish. Identity shifts. And this bun fight over the First Minister stuff, it has worked very well for the DUP in in the elections I was involved in 07 and 11 and 16, and indeed doesn't look to have worked just as well this time. But creating these men of straw and then wondering why nobody responds, and instead of actually, we need to get back to what is it we want to do. If we want to be First Minister and want to be Minister, you need to have a purpose you want to do with that power and responsibility. While our waiting lists are going, rising at a rate of knots, what are we going to do about health? And what are we going to do instead of fighting over things that we don't need to? So we've turned this into a border poll. Sam McBride rightly said there's been a pretty awful day for unionism, and unionism has to reflect, and that's why I've always said moving to one big party isn't a good idea. It's why I've been against unionist unity. You need to give choice and change, and I do hope the Ulster Unionists and SDLP do stay in opposition, but I mean there's a lot of food for thought, and I think if the few seats that come in will just be nip or tuck, whether DUP and Sinn Féin or even Stevens on this.
OK, all right, we will pause there for a second. Thank you all very much indeed. We're staying on air for another half hour or so as the results continue to come in here on BBC One Northern Ireland. But at this stage, we say goodbye to viewers on the news channel now who've been with us for our special election coverage. Thanks for your company. Bye-bye. Now, let's just explain that we're going to stay here till 12:30. If you're thinking of going to bed, please don't do that, because we think we have announcements which are imminent for East Belfast and South Belfast. And before we take our leave in about 35 minutes' time or thereabouts, we might have a much clearer picture of exactly what the new Stormont Assembly is going to look like. So if you stuck with us this long, you don't want to miss the next 35 minutes. These guys are absolutely ready to go. They've been drinking coffee and eating chocolate bars all afternoon.
Where's my tea?
OK, Robin Newton is out in East Belfast, we are being told. What do you make of that, Fionnuala? The former Speaker and someone who is a DUP stalwart.
At the expense of David Douglas. I mean, sorry, at David Douglas's, to David Douglas's benefit.
We assume so, yes. We believe that's the case.
Well, that seems
Son
like...
of Sammy Douglas.
There's a certain amount of justice in that. Robin Newton has had a pretty ungilded career over this last while. After a very long career as a fairly undistinguished councillor, I must say mainly, he's had a very bad last 6 months or so. He made no attempt whatsoever to be an impartial speaker. He followed a Sinn Féin speaker who worked extremely hard at being impartial.
He of course, would say, and he did say, that he was scrupulously non-partisan.
Well, that's not what anybody else in the Assembly said.
It's what he said. It's what he said.
Only
and
the
I'm
DUP
just pointing
would have
out
said
what he said.
But it didn't convince anybody else. So actually, this is one result that I don't think he could feel awfully unfairly done by about.
Yeah. Okay, and he also was involved, of course, in a constituency matter, the SIF, the Social Investment Fund, which again, his role in that was called into question very publicly in the past few months. Do you think that is the verdict of the electorate on those two issues on Robin Newton, perhaps?
Well, there was, it also became, it fed into the picture too that he was employing, I think, his wife and a child. So, you know, a pretty substantial whack coming out of Stormont expenses on someone
Wouldn't have been the only politician to be doing that, of course.
No, but he was the person who was the Speaker, and the DUP did that as well. They didn't see the need to have a Speaker who was seen by other parties as impartial.
Right, OK. I have to tell you, and I am only as good as the information I am given, but I think my colleagues have been given the incorrect information. And it seems now, and I will want confirmation of this in black and white, but it does seem that Robin Newton may have been the one who got the seat at the expense of David Douglas. Well, there you go. I was told that Robin Newton had not got the seat, so I can only pass on the information that
I stand by what I stand by my elaborate and
your analysis of Robin Newton
I won't withdraw a word of it.
Change.
Not a word.
Not a word. Okay, right.
Well, whoever got it had just come down to the reduction in seats. You know, I assume if there'd been 6 seats, the DUP would have looked very much like they would have held.
Yes, I was only standing. I was largely standing up for David Douglas, son of a decent man.
Fionnuala's point, the stuff around the day of the recall debate with Robin Newton was pretty appalling. stuff to watch, you know, and having worked, you know, get the private members bill through and worked with Mitchell McLaughlin as Speaker. I mean, and been called to ask questions as an independent and do things. I really couldn't have complained. Mitchell made a huge effort, you know, to be that, to rise to the job of Speaker.
I was kept waiting for a year by the DUP for the job.
I would like formal confirmation of that as soon as we get it. And as soon as we have it in black and white, I will share it with you. But that was the steer that we were given. That's the call that we were given. It seems we may have got it wrong. I can tell you, and I assume this is correct, that Eamon McCann is out in foil. But we know that Pat Catney has been successful in Lagan Valley, and I'm pleased to say that he joins us from the Lagan Valley Leisure Centre in Lisburn for a quick word. It's Fionnuala O'Connor wants to know, Pat Catney, first of all, congratulations. She also wants to know, are you a former publican or do you still own the kitchen bar?
No, I'm out of the kitchen bar now 10 years, so
there you go.
I did say
so
that.
So Fionnuala was right about that. OK, well, listen, joking aside, Mark Davenport was singing the praises of some of the food you used to serve with your drink there many years ago. He says he probably owes you a few pounds for the mashed potatoes and mince that you plied him with during the years when he was a younger man. Let you sort out the tab in due course. But look, congratulations. Are you delighted? That was a heck of a fight for the fifth seat.
Yeah, it was great. But listen, there was lots of different journalists and cameramen come in. I was glad to see them all. I knew how difficult and what a hard job they had, and they were bad times then. But look, we're here now in Lagan Valley. We have got where we are now. We've got the seat here. We had a strategy. We had a great young team, and we went out and we knocked doors, and we have delivered.
You certainly have delivered, and it's very interesting because Mark Davenport and Nicholas White were looking at the transfers. It seems that you came home at the end with transfers from the Ulster Unionist Party. How do you feel about that? Because Mike Nesbitt suggested that his candidate should transfer as their second preferences if they thought it was appropriate to the SDLP. In Lagan Valley, it seems they took his advice.
Well, you know, we had asked people to pass on their vote the way that they thought best in order to do that. Look, I only represent one community. I have stated on the doorstep that I want Northern Ireland to work, and that's where we are with it, and that's what I want to do. And the electorate has spoken here collectively. There's no communities as far as I'm concerned. There's only one community.
And what do you hope you will be able to do with that mandate, Pat, whenever you get up to Stormont? If Stormont is up and running again, what do you want to do and what kind of executive do you want to see put in place?
Well, as you know, I mean, I have never been there before, so we do have policies. We have a very strong party up there at the moment, and I think together we'll sit down and we'll talk and we'll plan where we want to go and how we want in order to try and deliver in order to make where we live better.
You could be the third largest party up there. At the moment, SDLP have got 11 seats. The Ulster Unionists have got 10. That would be quite a turn-up for the books from your perspective, wouldn't it?
Well, you know, we've seen it. I have great faith in our young leader in Colm, and I believe that we fought a very fair and an honest campaign. I don't think any of us wanted this election. This has been forced upon us. We weren't probably thinking that this election would come along. But look, once again, the electorate have gone out there and they've spoken in Lagan Valley. Remember what Lagan Valley is and what it was and where it's going. I have lived all my life here in Lagan Valley, and I want something really special. So collectively together, we're going to go down there, and I think, you know, look into the future, see where it is. I know that people here want to be governed by people here at home. So that's the first thing that I'd like to think. I'd like to think that we can get Stormont up and going again. Of course, it's down to those two larger and the bigger parties, but I'm sure that the mandate that they have got out there as well, they'll not find the SDLP wanting in order to try and deliver a service.
OK, well, look, good to talk to you, Pat. Hopefully we'll have many more conversations in the months and years ahead.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you. Off you go and celebrate. Lovely to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Well, Fionnuala, very interesting to hear from Pat Catney. We've now cleared it up. He doesn't own the kitchen bar anymore. There's not a lot. Let me suggest there isn't much that too many people could disagree with in what Pat had to say there.
Spoken like a publican, even like an ex-publican. A man who was always very good at commanding amity and jollity at the bar.
Well, there's a place for that,
and kept a good house. Kept a good house as well. No, and I think he was kicking for touch and very wise to do it. I don't think he has been right at the heart of SDLP policy making in the sense of.
No, he wasn't going to get into a detailed conversation.
No, and he was right.
There,
he was right.
Well,
he was right.
Yeah.
And he's seen what's happened in the rest of the night. He's seen Mike Nesbitt jump into the unknown. He'd be a daft man altogether if he did that. He hasn't heard. We haven't heard Colm Eastwood talking doing any kind of overview of the night. And fair enough, because it's been a mixed picture, but he must be fairly happy.
But the top line, I suppose, if you had to take it out there, as Pat Catney says, he wants Northern Ireland to work. He's going to Stormont to make Northern Ireland work.
And that's very much in the logic of what the SDLP have said. It's the way they fought the election. I think there are a lot of people who think there are limits to that as an argument, and there were certainly people who were very taken aback. Some of their voters at the prospect of going into opposition and then this, whatever it was, with Mike Nesbitt. And they were right to be that because it was a half-baked idea. So there they are with the better half of the half-baked idea now, with the other half having been burnt up or whatever it is that happens to thrown in the bin.
You mentioned Colm Eastwood there, and you said we hadn't heard from him for a while. We heard from him.
No, we haven't heard from him do an overview.
Yes, I think that's right. And also, when we last spoke to him on the programme, some of those more dramatic results hadn't come in. So it'll be very interesting to talk to him, whether it's tomorrow
and
or
the
Sunday
fact of leading the third largest party.
Yes,
I think
which is
not
in itself insignificant.
Well, the SDLP who've been battered and worn by the last 10 years and longer.
OK, he had a few interesting things to say, I gather, during his acceptance speech up in Foyle. Let's just take a listen to what he had to say to those who were still there when the announcement was made. OK, apparently it was very funny. It's hard to tell that whenever there's no sound. Maybe we will go and find the sound and you can actually hear what he had to say. We know what he looks like, but it was what he said that was interesting. And we'll work on that. We'll work on... You think you should save it off?
Well, no, I heard someone else say, another politician, I don't think it wasn't John, somebody earlier tonight said, oh, he has to shave that beard off, the white spot. It's just too distracting.
Well, I've heard some people say that it adds gravitas.
Well, I can assure you it wasn't me. I made no comments
No, I
about
didn't think it was you.
or on anybody all day. You know.
OK,
it
well,
wasn't
hopefully we'll get the sound on that.
But the interesting thing, Mark, if they do gain East Londonderry, they've went into this election with 12 and come out with 12. Yes. Colm, I think, will be pretty pleased that he's, you know, and as a percentage of a smaller assembly, he's actually done significantly.
Yeah, and I don't think
than...
too many people would have put too much money on that being the outcome. Apparently, we have found the elusive sound, and we can now bring to you and to our viewers at home what it was that Colm Eastwood said that tickled our fancy. Here it is.
But all of us have to put our shoulder to the wheel now to put things back together again. Whatever party we're in, we have a huge responsibility to ensure that we're not run from London. Not yet. It's been...
OK, well, it's been a very long day there for Colm Eastwood. That was worth it. That was a bit of a Freudian slip, wasn't it?
And it's another...
He's a closet unionist.
It's another odd one, isn't it, that they look better because the UUs did badly.
Yeah.
You know, so the people he was going into partnership with have done him a favour by doing worse because of that. That's a very odd one when you think about it. OK. Just a very quick word, Katrina. We're going to hear from Edwin Putz in a second or two. But Pat Catney, you could see how he'd make a positive contribution to Stormont, couldn't you?
Well, you could, and I congratulate him. I think I met him earlier and I don't think he expected this. But where I suppose I'd have a little bit of a difference with them. And again, it's the point I was making earlier. This is not just, and this is the shift that is needed here. This is not just about making the North, or whatever you call it, work. This is about the Good Friday Agreement, North, South, All Ireland, British, Irish, and the Assembly and the human rights. It's not just about the North. And that's, I suppose, where I differ with Pat there. He was just talking about the north.
OK. Thank you for that. Let's pause for a second or two. We're joined by Edwin Poots, who's at the Lagan Valley count at the Lagan Valley Leisure Centre in Lisburn. Mr Poots, evening to you. First of all, congratulations. You held on to your seat. You must be pleased about that.
Absolutely, yes. Saying I'm one of a rare breed now, almost extinct. I think there's about 5 or 6 of us who were first elected in 1998 and have continuously served as MLA since then. So we're getting to be a very small band indeed.
Disappointed for Brenda Hale, one of your running mates who didn't make it. We've just been speaking to Pat Catney, who took that seat from you, I suppose, in Lagan Valley. Brenda Hale, Nigel Dodds was saying, has made a positive contribution. He thought at that stage she'd hold on to the seat. How big a loss is she?
Absolutely. Very, very disappointed that we have lost Brenda as part of our DUP team. And I suppose what I find most gutting about it is that it was votes from the Ulster Unionist Party that went to the SDLP instead of the DUP that weakened unionism here in Lagan Valley, that has weakened unionism across Northern Ireland and ensured that the new Assembly will have a much weaker unionist representation. I think that's damaging for Northern Ireland. I think it's damaging for Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom, and that is a course of work that we as a party will have to focus on ensuring that damage is mitigated and that we will recover from this. But the Ulster Unionist Party and its former leader in particular has done huge damage to the unionist cause over the course of this election.
Well, Mike Nesbitt has gone, as you say. He says it was a bad night for the Ulster Unionist Party. Was it also a bad night? Be honest here. Was it a bad night for the DUP? You've lost Nelson McCausland, Trevor Clark, Lord Morrow, Philip Logan, Brenda Hale we've just discussed, and you're going to lose either Robin Newton or David Douglas in East Belfast. You may well drop below the magic figure of 30, and you're only about 1,200 votes ahead of Sinn Féin in the popular vote. Is that a success for Arlene Foster and the DUP?
Of course it's not a good night for the DUP. Let's be very clear about this. We said that there was going to be a rise in the nationalist vote, and we warned that unionists needed to come out in significant numbers, and they needed to back the party that could win. Others said it wasn't important what party won. Others said that there was no chance of Sinn Féin actually succeeding. But they've come to within 1,200 votes of actually succeeding. And if they don't think that would have a destabilising effect on Northern Ireland had they succeeded, well, then they are thoroughly wrong. I thank the many people who actually came out and increased the DUP vote, increased the DUP mandate, against all the odds, against all of the other parties, and against this particular corporation, the BBC, who exercised such bias in its reporting over the course of the last number of months.
Right. Well, you know that the BBC wouldn't accept that. I mean, the BBC's got a job to do, which is to be impartial and fair to everybody, which doesn't mean that we work for the DUP. But there you go.
Mark.
What?
No, you don't work for the DUP, Mark,
exactly.
but you certainly don't work for fake news either. And for weeks you put out fake news about £490 million being lost to the Northern Ireland purse and all of that there. Right. And that was fake news. It was totally false. And the BBC as an organisation is paid by the public purse not to be putting out false news. But you've done it for weeks.
OK, well, the BBC would absolutely dispute that. And I'm not going to waste my time talking to you about it because I doubt very much that I'll convince you. But anyway, I want to ask you whose leadership you are calling into question tonight. Mike Nesbitt, who's fallen on his sword, or are you also saying that Arlene Foster is herself at least partly responsible for what you have said is not a good night for the DUP?
Well, I think that huge damage has been done as a result of the Ulster Unionist Party's intervention. The Ulster Unionist Party's call to go out and support nationalists instead of unionists. So we're seeing unionist seats fall as a result of that there. The circumstances were immensely difficult for the DUP in this election. We have done remarkably well under those circumstances to hold our own. And we will ensure that we coalesce and we come together and we stand together in ensuring that the people of Northern Ireland are well represented. We will articulate their case both at Westminster and at the Northern Ireland Assembly as we go forward, as we go out of Europe, which was a huge success for us, and as we take Northern Ireland forward in the United Kingdom. Katrina's talking about the North, or whatever you call it. It's Northern Ireland, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. We're proud of it. We're going to keep it. And Katrina can like it or lump it.
OK, can I ask you, does Arlene Foster, as leader of the DUP, enjoy your full confidence tonight?
Yes.
So it's as simple as that. You don't believe that her leadership is even up for discussion at this stage, even though it is, as you have said yourself, not a good night for the DUP?
Whenever the Assembly was reduced to the 90-seater, it was always going to be a case where 6 or 7 seats were lost. We have lost 2 or 3 more as a consequence of the actions of the Ulster Unionist Party and their encouragement to go out and vote for nationalists, and ensuring that unionism was deprived of seats in the Northern Ireland Assembly and that nationalism was strengthened and enhanced. Any unionist that proposed that is not fit to be called a unionist, and I welcome the fact that Mike Nesbitt is stepping aside as the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party.
David McElveen, a former DUP MLA, said to me on The View last night that Arlene Foster and indeed Mike Nesbitt lack charisma. They have, she said, as much charisma as as much charisma as a piece of tofu. And he predicted that Arlene Foster would not be leader of the DUP come Monday. Any truth in that? Any part of that you agree with, Edwin?
I think she certainly has more charisma than a sour grape.
And that's what David McElveen is it?
Well, I think that some of the comments over the course of the last number of days would appear to be sour grapes. We have come back to the Northern Ireland Assembly with a strong team, and we will ensure that we articulate the case well in that Assembly. We will fight very hard at Westminster for Northern Ireland and ensure that as we leave the European Union, that Northern Ireland's case is well articulated and that we seek to get the best possible outcome for it.
OK, Edwin, just one final question to you. I'm not absolutely sure about the numbers here, but if Sinn Féin was to sneak 1 seat ahead of you or to come back on the same number of seats, potentially 28 seats each, how significant would that be for the DUP psychologically? Because we've had a lot of conversation with some members of your party, it has to be said, about the psychology of politics in Northern Ireland. How big a blow would that be, in your view, if it were to happen?
Well, it would demonstrate that the message that we were putting out was an accurate message, that it wasn't fear or it wasn't some scare story, that we indeed were in a close battle. And for others to say that it doesn't matter, of course it matters. I'm thankful that we haven't come out in second place. We have come out in first place, but it's almost a photo finish, and that's not a position that we'll want to be in future elections.
Well, what it says is that you were right in your argument that it could happen, but it also says, with respect, Edwin Poots, that you didn't persuade people, enough people, to support you to prevent it from happening in the first place.
This election was called in the worst possible circumstances for the DUP. People knew that we were in a difficult place and sought to kick us when we were down, but we were tough enough to come through it, we were resilient enough to come through it, and we have still come out as the lead party in Northern Ireland, and we will lead for Northern Ireland. Be absolutely assured of it. We will lead for Northern Ireland, and we will not let our case go by default. We go into these negotiations and talks that will take place, and there will be a degree of pragmatism, as there should be, but we will also be tough. And on those issues, which we have convictions, Sinn Féin can be absolutely assured that there will be absolutely no caving in on them, and that'll be a matter for them to decide what to do, but we will not be caving in on matters which we have strong convictions on.
All right, OK. Look, good to talk to you, as always. Edwin, thanks very much indeed. Congratulations to you on a personal front. Nice to talk to you. No doubt we'll talk again in the not-too-distant future. Stephen, I want to get your thoughts on what Edwin Poots had to say. Not a good night for the DUP. We said this would happen. We're still the top party in Northern Ireland, and Arlene Foster has his full confidence.
I would exactly expect Edwin to say that. I mean, Edwin is pretty straightforward, and anybody who knows him knows that he will take that line. The difficulty for the DUP, in a sense, is that having cried wolf so many times when there wasn't a big problem, on this one occasion they're being seen their vote eaten alive in certain places through the very thing they warned about. But it doesn't get them past the fact that they've had a bad night. And, you know...
He says that's Mike Nesbitt's fault.
Well, he would say that. But...
Mike hasn't had a great night either.
No,
you know,
he seems pretty happy about that.
I don't think he said Arlene had his full... Sorry, Stephen.
Well, I said, does she enjoy your full confidence? He said yes.
That was far from a declaration of full confidence. I was struck by how he held back from saying any such thing.
Yes. Well, I mean, the direct answer to the question was yes.
Yes.
You're reading into the mood music surrounding it.
There was nothing else
and you're
to
saying
read.
that while he said yes, you're not entirely convinced. Is that it?
You had to extract that slowly and painfully. And, well,
Well,
maybe
well,
not painfully. I thought he was definitely withholding ecstatic confidence.
Did you
Can
get
I
that
say
sense?
that?
Did you get that?
There is... He wasn't glowing with praise for her. But by the same token, this is going to be something that will not happen that quickly. The thing is, under Ian Paisley, you tended to think of the DUP as a monolith. Over the last 5 to 10 years, it's no such thing, and there are factions. And at various points, Edwin has been identified with factions. So, no, he did not go so far as to say, I'm not going to support her, nor did he particularly hold out that he wouldn't in future.
Well, to be fair, Stephen, I mean, and to be absolutely fair to him, when he was asked, does she enjoy your full confidence, he said yes.
Yes, he did. But what I think what Fadil's picking up on is he didn't go any further than just the one-word answer. But having said that, I mean, like, it's been said about Edwin before, he's more comfortable talking to cows sometimes than he is to people.
Right.
Well, I also remember him saying that Arlene Foster was a woman who needed to be... Wasn't there something about...
Well, he said, first and foremost, she was a wife and mother. That's what he said at the time.
But I think that I don't think...
Just very quickly, because we want to go to Mark Davenport.
OK, I don't think the DUP are understanding the impact of their position on Brexit within their own voters. And I've met loads of them. We did a North-South meeting, which many of the
But look,
unionists...
he's pleased about Brexit. He said he's delighted about that. That's good news. You heard him say it.
No, I know that. No,
but you're not going to convince him otherwise.
No, it's not about me convincing him. What I'm saying is I think damage has been done to the DUP vote because many people in the business community don't want a hard border and want special status.
Well,
so it's impacting on the DUP.
Well, yeah, I guess if we had somebody from the DUP here, they would say, yeah, it's impacting on the DUP, yeah, except their vote went up. You know, their vote went up and they're probably going to hold fairly steady in terms of seats. It's still the lead party.
Enough for the turnout.
All right, OK. We'll pause again here and we'll just catch up with the thoughts of Mark Davenport and Nicholas.
Thanks very much, Mark. Well, we're going to look at the overall scoreboard at this stage because this really is what you would call a neck battle, and you can see it up there. DUP on 26 seats, Sinn Féin on 26 seats, just a few to declare. What do we think is the maximum the DUP could get to at this stage?
DUP will win one seat in East Belfast, where the last two candidates are both DUP, so they're going to get one of those. South Belfast, the DUP will get one. They think they may get a second one if they can beat the Green Party. I'm not at all sure about that.
So probably 28, an outside
28.
chance of 29, probably 28. Sinn Féin, 26 there, but we think that maybe they'll only be able to put on one seat.
27 for sure. They'll get one seat in East Londonderry. I don't think they will get the second, which earlier had seemed quite likely that they would.
Because of the comeback of the veteran John Dallett there that we were discussing earlier. SDLP 11, and this is...
And John Dallett
if we add John Dallett, that takes us to 12, which is, in seat terms, it's a standstill, which is great when the Assembly is shrinking, isn't it?
It's an extraordinary result. I have to say this is the second election in a row that late transfers to the SDLP have confounded my early predictions.
Now, the other parties are standing still, Alliance, but in between the two of them, we've got the Ulster Unionists who've taken the big fall.
Yep, they're on fewer seats than the SDLP, despite having had more votes. Their votes were in all the wrong places, and their transfers didn't come home in time.
We'll just look at the share of the vote, because we have this interesting single transferable system, and it's not always the case that you actually can translate your share of the vote into the seats that you get. So we see here Sinn Féin very much closing the gap on the DUP, which is why they're so close at the top. And the Ulster Unionists and the SDLP sort of plateauing. Actually, the SDLP did slightly worse than the Ulster Unionists in terms of the trend of the share of the vote, but they've translated their vote into seats, which was the other way round last time.
Cormac Justice, in both 2007 and 2011, it was the other way round, that the SDLP got slightly more votes and slightly fewer seats than the Ulster Unionists.
And what about the overall unionist-nationalist balance in the new Assembly, do you think,
It's
Nick?
absolutely fascinating. And if South Belfast goes, as I suspect, with the last 2 seats going to one DUP and the Greens, then there will be 40 Unionists and 39 Nationalists in the new Assembly.
And the remainder made up of, I think it's 11 others then we make
That's right, 11 others. That's 8 Alliance and 2 Greens and People Before Profit.
So in the old Assembly, Unionists made up a majority, we reckon about 52%, but now they're falling short of the 50% of this Assembly.
Down to 45%, yeah. 45, 46.
So that's why you can see it's so interesting where these last few seats go, because things are really very close and in the balance there. Mark?
It's absolutely fascinating, Mark, isn't it, where those final few seats might go. We're not clear exactly what's happening in South Belfast. Bit of a fight for that final seat. And Robin Newton still hanging on against his running mate, David Douglas, son of Sammy Douglas, for the final seat there as well. So just, John, we haven't heard from John for a moment or two, just looking at those seats, looks like 28, maybe 29 for the DUP, looks like 27, maybe 28 for Sinn Féin. So it's still possible they could end neck and neck on 28 each.
But it's possible, it's most likely to be 28, 27, but overall for unionism as well, short of that 40, that, you know, psychological, we've talked a lot about this psychological thing with unionism, well shy of the 45, 46 seats it would need, say, to command
to have a majority of the 90.
You are at 28, 38 with the UUP, and then Jim Allister and Claire Sugden, you're at 40 designated unionists, you know, with nationalism at 39. So it's just, it is a very changed dynamic and changed psychic, and unionism will have to look at itself, and that's why, you know, Stephen's points about the problems for Arlene mightn't come in 24 hours, 48 hours, but I think there's a huge question mark over how long-term a future she would have.
We're into final thoughts. We're into the last minute or two of the programme. Fionnuala, just final thoughts from you?
Well, if I could just talk about Robin Newton again. No, I'm joking, I'm joking.
We've done that.
I think I've done my up-sum for the night. No, I think that new balance...
40 unionists, 39 nationalists. Does it?
Of course it does.
Does it matter?
Of course it matters. Of course it matters. It matters to both. And it matters for questions of manners. I heard Jerry Adams talking about manners earlier in the night. Time for a bit of manners. Well, for a man who talked about Orange B blank 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 S not that long ago, he'd need to watch his manners in the future too. And this is where I think it's very important for Sinn Féin to make their talk, about their endless talk about equality and respect, ring true for everybody, not just for themselves. They're always a little too pleased with themselves. The worry I would have for them is that this will go to their heads and they'll forget to be respectful and mind their manners.
The one thing...
Are you prepared to take that on board, Katrina?
Well, I mean, obviously, Sinn Féin, Michelle O'Neill has been saying consistently that a win for Sinn Féin is a win for everyone. And if you just look at the diversity of the Sinn Féin vote, I mean, Sinn Féin has been fighting for LGBT rights, fighting for women's rights, all different ethnic minority. What I want to see...
On the point that Fionnuala was making, I mean, for example, Michelle O'Neill did say to me that she had words with Michelle Gildernew when Michelle Gildernew said, we'll put manners on Arlene Foster. And I asked her if that was appropriate, and she said, no, it wasn't.
And she said it
she'd
promptly.
Spoken to Michelle Gildernew about it. It wasn't acceptable. That's not the way she wanted to do business.
Well,
do you applaud that?
I would, yes. I don't believe anyone should be using terms like put manners on. What I want to see is celebration of diversity and respect. That's what I want to see. And like Sinn Féin has always said, we celebrate that diversity. We fight for everybody's rights. I don't talk about when I was elected. I don't talk about my constituents. I talk about working for everybody, and I have always worked for everybody.
Okay.
And we did get a significant vote from across the political spectrum, and many people said to me, I'm Protestant, I'm voting. for your party. I'm voting because...
Sorry, just many people, many
Yes,
Protestants told you they
yes,
were going to vote for Sinn Féin.
yes.
Well, that was maybe a low transfer you were going to get,
No,
rather
no.
than first preferences?
No, we got first preferences.
Where?
How many's many?
Where?
Well, first of all, we got them from the LGBT community. We got them from women. Women on the doors gave number 1 to Sinead Ennis. And they told me, I was on the door and they told me. So I don't think people should be as sceptical that we don't get votes from within. I didn't say unionist community, I said Protestant community. Because there are, like, the Protestant community is not a monolith in the same way as the nationalist community. Nationalist Republican community isn't a monolith.
OK, well, I don't think anybody would disagree with you as far as that's concerned. We've got a couple of extra minutes, so we're going to go to David Maxwell just to get the latest on what's happening as far as the counts in South and East Belfast are concerned. Can you put us out of our misery? Any clear picture to report? We maybe got things badly wrong on Robin Newton.
Well, I'm afraid I can't put it very clear for you at the minute, Mark. We're into the final stages, I can tell you that, but we still haven't decided. A decision hasn't been made between Robin Newton and David Douglas. I spoke to David Douglas a short time ago. I can tell you that he doesn't expect to be returned. He said to me that they're just going through the motions, but we await to see. And of course, in South Belfast, the other one we're waiting for, Emma Pengelly, Christopher Stalford and Claire Bailey still in the running for that. We expect Michael Henderson to be eliminated, and it depends on where his vote goes as to who is going to pick up those last 2 seats.
OK, well, it's a fascinating situation there. It's really, really tight. And of course, it'll have a bearing on the overall state of the parties. I think that's Claire Bailey, actually, just over your left shoulder, who's walking about there. I'm not quite sure if well, she's walking in the wrong direction, so never mind. You can, well, I'll let you go, David, but if you can grab her and she gives you a heads up on what's happening, that'll be great. Anyway, we wait to see, and they're not giving you any indication as to when they may have. Presumably you're going to stay there until it's done and dusted. You told me an hour and a half ago you thought it would be an hour and a half, but you're not home yet.
I think I said a couple of hours, but we've been told by the Electoral Commission we don't expect to be here past 1:30, and I think the signs seem to be that will be the case, that it'll all be wrapped up probably within the next hour.
OK, all right, David, thanks very much indeed for that. John?
Interesting, Mark, given the Lagan Valley touches South Belfast, given the rate of unionist transfers at that point to the SDLP way out of like the unionist vote, where Michael Henderson's transfers might go. And
if you were a betting man, how do you think that might pan out?
I think I'm a betting man it'll be 1 DUP and 1 Green Party.
And Claire Bailey.
I don't think.
Which DUP? Go on. Put your neck on the line.
Christopher Stalford.
You think Christopher Stalford? I mean, he had more first preferences than Emma.
Yes, but I think he'll get it. Interesting on the other numbers, even just from the Assembly going back and working, the DUP might be less keen to claim the Speaker's role, that it takes them further away from getting things like petition of concern. And Sinn Féin experienced that when Mitchell took the Speaker's role, that suddenly Stephen Agnew, they needed more than just Stephen Agnew to sign the petition of concern. Simple things like that can change how a party feels. So we could end up with somebody like John Dallett as Speaker.
Yes. Well, that's interesting if John Dallett does indeed win that seat in East Londonderry. Stephen, last couple of minutes. I know I said that a few minutes ago, but I think it is the last couple of minutes. Just your thoughts to try and bring these loose ends together for us?
Well, I think we're almost at a back to square one scenario with the Assembly, because so much has happened here. So there's been so much change that it's difficult to see how you plot forward getting back into government. So, there would need to be quite a lot of negotiation, one would have thought. And at the end of it, both the DUP and Sinn Féin have very difficult decisions to take about the red lines that they had before this all started. If there's any prospect of a restoration of the Assembly, everyone is going to have to give a little. And up until this point, certainly the last 3 months, there have been no indications of give. And certainly Edwin Poots wasn't in a mood to give a short while ago.
Fionnuala?
Yes, who blinks first? It all depends, I suppose, on who's in the negotiations and who's chairing them. One of the first things I think Sinn Féin will have to do is say, not James Brokenshire. And I would have thought the SDLP have said they'll say that as well. So somebody else
and
to chair
Alliance,
it.
Naomi Long also said that.
That's right. So somebody else to chair it, that's the first hiccup. After that, I think people will have to think very hard.
Katrina, you have literally one sentence.
Interesting, James Brokenshire. I was tallying today. In every tally I did, the Conservative Party got naught.
Okay.
And yet he was out canvassing.
All right, we will leave it there. Thank you all very much indeed for your time throughout today. It has been a long day for all of us, but much longer for many of the candidates out there in the count centres right across Northern Ireland. The votes claimed one party leader, Mike Nesbitt, who resigned this evening after a poor result for the Ulster Unionists. Might be tomorrow before the final picture is known, but already this election has produced more than its fair share of storylines. Other prominent figures to lose out were the former Deputy Ulster Unionist leader Danny Kennedy and Joanne Dobson. Well-known DUP figures who lost their seats include the party chairman Lord Morrow and the former Minister Nelson McCausland. If the election was a gamble for Sinn Féin, it paid off. The party's vote was up almost 4%. Alliance's vote share was up just over 2 percentage points. The SDLP lost its veteran West Belfast MLA Alex Atwood, but its high point came with the comeback of its former deputy leader Dolores Kelly in Upper Bann and the surprise success for Pat Catney in Lagan Valley, thanks to Ulster Unionist transfers. In Londonderry East, John Dallett's still fighting. That is it for this election programme. You can follow the final few results tomorrow on Radio Ulster starting at 9 o'clock and, of course, on our digital services. As ever, we leave you with some of the more memorable moments of today from all of us. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.